Chapter 168. 152. The realm of the source of divine power to make the land of Marduk a true realm of the source of divine power. Murin had to complete everything herself. This was very much like how Pharaoh gave Amun a piece of land in the plains of Duk, but it was only a piece of paper, and Amun still had to occupy and reclaim it himself. Murin requested that the sinners of the Battle of the Gods be moved to the land of Marduk. These people originally believed in the gods of the defeated side, and were the ancestors of the Duk miners. They were punished to mine parangons in an extremely desolate and difficult environment, and their survival and reproduction faced great challenges. Only those with the strongest blood could survive, but they were still in danger of extinction. At this time, Murin performed a miracle, taught them the skills of Duk mining, and gave them the oracle of the patron god, so that they could survive in this dangerous land of Marduk for generations. Because these people were the descendants of the sinners, according to the oldest oracle of Anunnaki, they were not allowed to leave the land of Marduk. This ancient oracle was passed down from generation to generation, and later became the law of the Hittite kingdom, but few people knew its origin. This law had been enforced by the dynasties for hundreds of years, and there was a very practical reason. The people of Duk were the best craftsmen on the continent, and Duk was such an important producer of parangons, and later became a producer of iron ore. If these miners left Duk, it would be a loss for any kingdom, unless Duk no longer existed. If there were no laws and regulations, who would want to live in such a difficult environment for generations? As for what happened later, there was no need for Schrödinger to describe it. Amun himself knew it very well. The people of Duk betrayed the oracle and lost the protection of Murin, and Imral launched a flood to destroy the place, turning the plains of Duk into 1,000 miles of fertile land. In the ancient prophecy, the true god of the gods would be born here, and perhaps Imral thought that the time had come. As for the realm of the source of divine power, what did it mean? The believers claimed to be the servants of the gods. Their beliefs, sacrifices, and prayers were the source of the gods' power. This power was different from ordinary magic and body arts. It was a kind of divine power that the gods possessed. Schrödinger had never possessed an independent divine realm of her own, so her understanding of divine power was not comprehensive. There were two main aspects to it. First, it could gather power to strengthen one's soul. It was like having many selves. When these countless selves were gathered together, one could understand the ultimate meaning of life in the world. Secondly, it could help the gods face the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days. At this point, Amun couldn't help but ask, do the gods also have to face the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days? Schrödinger's body trembled slightly. Whether it is body arts or magic, if one practices to the peak of the 9th level, they will have the power to fight against the gods in the mortal world. They are often called demigods, such as Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But the true demigods did not have this meaning in the beginning. They were people who were guided by the gods and had the potential to become gods. But in the eyes of the world, they were often gods, such as me in the past. If you achieve the 9th level of the power of two sides, you will be a true demigod in the ancient legends. You will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods in many myths, and even have a divine realm. But to truly achieve that realm of eternal life, the judgment of fate, and judgment of the end of days, are a test that must be passed. Do you know why the Ennead got its name? Amun blinked and said, isn't it because of the Ennead? Schrödinger. It is indeed because of the Ennead, but you don't know the real reason. Before Horus, only these 9 people became the true gods of eternal life, and Horus was the 10th and the last. The other gods, including me in the past, were only demigods. I was once only one step away, but in the end, I did not succeed. Amun went to participate in the blessing ceremony of Isis, and stayed in Montefiore for a total of 7 or 8 days. He sent Madanzo back the day after arriving in Montefiore to let Moses and the others leave. It was a long journey, and although they had been prepared, it took time to pack everything up and leave. So when Amun returned to the territory, Moses and the others had only left a few days ago. More than 60 clansmen, more than 20 carriages, loaded with various supplies, including farming tools, clothing, food, seeds, tents, living utensils, and so on. They were going to reclaim the wilderness and rebuild their hometown. and it was the most important migration after ending their bitter fate. Naturally, they had to bring as much as possible of what they needed. Especially after leaving the territory of Igut, they had to cross thousands of miles of desert and hundreds of miles of swamps and jungles. Food, water, and self-defense weapons were indispensable, and more than 20 carriages were fully loaded. Such a team could not move very fast, and when the new pharaoh's order spread to all parts of the country, they had just arrived at the city of Heliopolis, which was also the city closest to Montefiore on the east bank of the Nile River, and still far from the border of Igut. Moses was stopped at the city's checkpoint, and the officer guarding the checkpoint looked at the general's order, and then told them, "Now that the new pharaoh has ascended the throne, according to the latest decree, you can no longer go. Fortunately, this place is not far from the city of Harak. Please return to the territory immediately. If you continue to go forward in violation of the order, you will be arrested and forcibly repatriated." Moses had no choice but to order the caravan to turn around and head south. The clansmen's disappointment was indescribable. They had waited for 6 years, and who knew how much suffering they had gone through. Just as they saw a glimmer of hope, it was suddenly extinguished by a sudden change. That damned Pharaoh Lazarus too. Why did he have to die at this time? And now such a change had happened in the empire of Igut. Once the people who relied on faith fell into despair, the pain and hesitation were indescribable, and they did not even have the strength to walk. Moses comforted the clansmen. "We have already endured and waited for so long. Why not continue to persevere? As long as God has not given up on us, there is no need to be disappointed." The clansmen asked Moses, "But where is God?" The 12 miners that Moses taught all said, "God is watching us. As long as we do not lose faith in our hearts, we can find our home." That night, they did not pass through any towns. They stopped at a place on the bank of the Nile River, sheltered from the wind, and spent the night in a tent. In the distance was the rushing water, and close by was the high mountains and dense forests. Moses ordered the 12 clansmen who had practiced the power of 2 sides to take turns to keep watch, while he sat in the carriage and meditated, calling Allah in his heart. "My God, the Savior of hope, I call to you. I beg you to hear my voice. Do not let the flame of hope be extinguished again. Guide my people back to their home, even if it means sacrificing my body, mind, and life, as long as they return to the land of Duk. God, I am your servant, please help me." At this moment, Moses heard a voice in his mind. "God is watching you and your people. Please come to the forest and accept the guidance of the flame of hope." Moses hurriedly opened his eyes and got out of the carriage. Without being discovered by the clansmen, he quietly sneaked into the forest by the roadside with his iron stick in hand. Sure enough, there was a faint flame in the distance. He passed through the trees and came to a valley. He saw a bush burning in the fire. When he got closer, he saw that the tree was intact. There were 2 people standing on the open ground. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted. "Messenger of God, Moses is summoned." One of the messengers said, "Moses, there is a new situation now. The pharaohs of Igut will not allow you to leave. If you stay, you may never have the chance to return to your home. Do you choose to go back or to move forward?" Moses replied, "If God can guide the way, of course I choose to move forward and return to my home." The other messenger asked again, "This road is very difficult, and it will be even more difficult to lead so many people. You have a chance to go by yourself. God allows you to choose." Moses pursed his lips and said, "No, if I wanted to leave alone, I could have done so long ago. God told me to guide my people back to their home. Even if I can't set foot on the land of Duk with all my efforts, I have to help my people fulfill their wishes." The messenger nodded. "Very good, you really did not let God down. Give me your stick, let me teach you how to do it." Moses passed the iron staff to the oracle. Link turned around and took out the ventusselve of the wind that was embedded inside, and replaced it with the one that was used to forge a spatial magic tool. Then he turned back and handed the stick to Moses. "I will teach you how to use it. You can only move forward by relying on this stick. The messenger of God will guide the way ahead and erase your traces behind." Moses stayed in the forest for most of the night, and only quietly returned when it was almost dawn. At dawn he gathered everyone and said, "Last night, God summoned me. He told us that we cannot return to Amon's territory, or we will never have the chance to return home. From today onwards, we will walk in the deep mountains and wilderness, avoiding all the checkpoints and tracking, and walk back to our home on foot. God is watching us, and he will also guide the way." The worried clansmen were pleasantly surprised when they heard this, and there was a lot of discussion. To walk thousands of miles in the wilderness, they had to avoid the official roads. If they lost their caravans and supplies, how could they cross thousands of miles of deserts and swamps? This was tantamount to becoming a fugitive slave. They would be hunted in Egypt, and no one knew how many dangers they would face. It was almost an impossible task. Moses waited until everyone was almost done talking, then asked, "God is testing our faith. Whoever is willing to be an eternal slave of Pharaoh, to build the shrine and the mausoleum, can go back now. Clansmen, who among you is willing to embark on the road home and follow me into the mountains?" The 12 strength clansmen stood up and said, "We are willing to embark on this road. God has given us power and light to guide us." Moses nodded with relief and said, "God has given you a title, called judges. From today onwards, you are the 12 judges of the Dushians. You will lead your clansmen to sacrifice to God and strengthen the power in your hearts." Another person stood up and asked, "But God did not give us power, Moses. Can you guarantee that God will always protect us on our way home?" Moses leaned on his cane and said, "No one can guarantee in the name of God. This is just the promise of God to our people, to provide selfless guidance and help. Power belongs to you. Faith makes you stronger. Hope is in your heart, and the road is under your feet." In the end, all the clansmen followed Moses, abandoned the carriage and entered the dense forest in the mountains. Although some of them were hesitant in their hearts, they did not dare to go back alone since so many of their clansmen had made the same choice. Moses walked through the valley where he met the oracle yesterday, through the bushes that had been burning with fire, and entered a narrow path in the mountains on the east bank of the Nile River. He did not know that the valley was the place where Ammon had been hunted, and the path that the oracle had guided them to take was the road that Ammon had used to escape from the hunters to Montefiore in the wilderness. Now Ammon let his clansmen leave along this road, except for a few places where they had to bypass cities and towns. Most of the rest of the road was traveled by Ammon himself, so they could avoid human habitation and the patrols of the city guards. The carriages were abandoned on the side of the road, but the clansmen still led the oxen, horses, and donkeys. These animals had grass to eat on the road, and if necessary, they could be slaughtered for food, because they had almost no chance to go to the cities to buy supplies. More than 60 clansmen, most of whom were strong young miners, unloaded as much as they could from the carriages, and let the animals carry them on their backs, making their way through the wilderness with difficulty. Walking like this would affect their speed, but Moses did not stop his clansmen from carrying the animals and supplies. After all, no one could walk such a long distance empty-handed. Although God had given him a magical cane, he had instructed him in advance that it was best not to use it. The 12 judges were the strongest supporters of returning home. Their names were Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. Moses' servant, Joshua, asked along the way, "Once we leave, we'll become fugitive slaves. We can't buy things in the cities, so we can only rely on the supplies we brought with us. Not to mention, we have to cross the desert. Do we need a unified plan?" Moses nodded and said, "Then you'll be responsible for the registration, unified management and distribution of supplies. If we use our food sparingly and don't delay our journey, it should be just enough. We just need to bring enough water before we enter the desert." Joshua accepted the order, and made a count of the livestock and food the clansmen brought with them. He also calculated the amount of food they had to consume each day, and distributed them at a fixed time. There were not many mountains around the city of Heliopolis, but there were undulating wilderness and dense forests far away from the Nile Valley. As long as they avoided the inhabited villages and cities, almost no one would notice them. Madanzo drove the crystal shuttle in front of them as a lookout, while Link held the Sphinx and the shadow-chasing lamp and quietly followed behind the group, erasing the traces of the large group. Link was the tribe leader of the savages, so he was good at traversing the wilderness and tracking prey since he was young. Naturally, he was the best at this. John returned to the territory and reported to Amon that Moses and the other clansmen had abandoned the carriages and left through the small paths. Amon nodded and thanked them for their hard work, then instructed John to continue patrolling the territory every day as usual. Technically, there was no longer any need for Amon to stay in Egypt, and he could leave at any time. However, he had been staying in his territory, behaving like a law-abiding and honest supreme general of the empire. Instead, Schrödinger was the first to lose his cool, and took the initiative to ask Amon, "Why aren't you leaving yet? Whether it's returning to the plains of Duk or escorting Moses in secret, it's better than staying here. Do you still want to stay in the empire of Igut and get promoted and make a fortune?" Amon smiled bitterly. "You know why I'm not leaving, so why deliberately tease me?" Kitten puffed up her cheeks. "Is it because of her? You're worried about her, but you don't think about the fact that you might not be able to protect yourself." The her she mentioned was obviously referring to the guardian holy maiden of the Temple of Isis, Maria. Amon nodded and said, "Yes, of course it's because of her. According to you, the goddess Isis is long gone. And now that today's change has happened, Horus has lost his position as the king of the Ennead. I'm afraid the status of the Temple of Isis will also be shaken." Kitten smiled. "You're already the supreme general of the empire. You don't see the problem so simply, do you? The guardian holy maiden of Isis is just a symbol. And even if the pharaoh wants to worship the new king, he has to take into account the beliefs and habits of the people. Although the status of the Temple of Isis has declined, why do you have to worry about Maria? Do you think that Maria has nothing but the identity of the guardian holy maiden of Isis?" Schrödinger's words were very reasonable. The guardian holy maiden of the Temple of Isis was a symbol of the theocracy of the empire. The main temple of the cities of Igut was the Temple of Horus, but the main temple of Montefiore was the Temple of Isis, and it had become the center of the theocracy of the whole Lower Igut. The reasons were complicated. On the one hand, of course, it was because of the unique status of the goddess Isis, which was related to the realm of the gods. On the other hand, it was because the main territory of the Igut was divided into two prosperous areas, the Upper and Lower Igut. In the Lower Igut, there must be a center that symbolized the theocracy and the royal rule. The existence of the guardian holy maiden of Isis had a dual background of history and reality. Even if the new pharaoh wanted to worship the new king, he still needed to consolidate the rule of the Lower Igut. The status of the guardian holy maiden of Isis might be weakened, but the prestige of Maria herself in the Lower Igut was already very stable. If she could adapt to the situation and knew how to cooperate, it would not be difficult for her to cope with the new changes. Amon even thought that Maria had the talent to be the prime minister of the empire. Even if she was not the guardian holy maiden of Isis, she was fully qualified and capable of becoming the new high priest of the empire. But Amon was still worried. What was he worried about? Thinking of this, he said to Schrödinger, "It is because of her, but not entirely because of her. I want to stay here and see what happens. It will be good for Moses and the others. At least I can get the latest decree in time, and use my identity to provide protection. Another reason, of course, is because of you." Chapter 169. 153 The birth of a monotheistic religion. Amon replied, "I have experienced a brand new power, which is completely different from pure body arts and magic arts. It is like a newborn baby growing up, and the power is inseparable in the process of growth. This requires a stable environment to experience and nurture, and I'd better stay in the territory to train so that I can unlock the seal for you as soon as possible." Schrödinger: "In that case, I'm too embarrassed to urge you to do anything. The nurturing of power cannot be rushed. I'll stay here with you." If other factors were not taken into account, the best time for Amon to leave the empire of Igut was after Moses reached the plains of Duk. Based on the speed at which the clansmen walked through the wilderness, it would take at least half a year. Amon did his best to arrange everything, but he was not fearlessly anxious. Except for being a little worried about Maria's situation, the Supreme General was calm. According to Schrödinger, Amon's breakthrough to the 8th level of the power of two sides would be completely different from other training methods in the world, like a brand new beginning. Amon did not quite understand at first, but when he recovered the power of the bloodline in his body little by little, he realized what was going on. In the silence of the night, Amon closed his eyes and meditated as usual, but what he recovered was the power of the bloodline in his body, merging it with his magic power to grow together. A bow floated quietly in front of him. It was the divine bow that had once shocked the world. The bowstring was pulled silently, and an invisible arrow of energy condensed. But Amon did not shoot the arrow, otherwise the house would collapse. He was just demonstrating. Then the bowstring was put back, and the invisible arrow disappeared. The divine bow spun, as if caught by an invisible hand, and gently floated back to Amon's leg. Amon opened his eyes in the darkness and sighed. So that's how it is. I should have known. He took out a dagger from thin air. It was one of the most common weapons in Amon's collection. It was the one Mayor Dusty gave him when he left Duk. The saber flew through the air like a fish, emitting a dazzling light. It slashed out a cross-shaped arc of light in the air, which then spun rapidly to form a circular shield. Next, the saber slashed out and quickly retracted, flying back into Amon's hand. He muttered to himself in the darkness, "This is the last sword attack that Enkidu used against me." However, that sword attack was much stronger. Before it could reach me, he had already died. Amon used to practice the power of two sides, but in truth, he was still just a warrior and a sorcerer at the same time. He could only use magic in combat, or pick up a weapon at the same time while casting magic. But at this moment, the situation had changed. He was clearly using a weapon to cast magic, and at the same time, he was also using magic to control the weapon. The two powers were no longer distinguishable. Gilgamesh's bow could not be drawn at all, unless one was born with divine strength, or had the power of a supreme warrior. But Amon did not hold it in his hand. He simply used spatial magic and energy magic to draw the bow. At the same time, if one was not a supreme mage, one would not be able to condense the arrow. Amon did not combine these two powers together, but used one power naturally. This was different from pure magic in body arts. It was not simply a combination of both. This made Amon's methods much more refined than before. In the future, there would no longer be a distinction between body arts and magic arts. Instead, there would only be emphasis on what he was good at. Amon recalled Enkidu's last battle against the black vortex and lightning in the sky. The broken broadsword in his hand turned into a misty golden light, not because it was too fast and dazzling. Enkidu was a pure warrior. He only practiced body arts. When he reached the peak of the 9th level, and was about to break through, he experienced the fusion of power. It was difficult to say whether it was body arts or magic. This kind of power existed from the very beginning. Body arts and magic were just two sides of the same body. To be more precise, it should be called two sides as one. One was its core. All kinds of magic and body arts in the world were just 1,000 sides of this one body. Amon thought that his practice of the power of two sides was the right path. Now he finally understood why Schrödinger kept saying that it was the so-called power of two sides. In fact, Amon had taken a long detour. Even Bear, who had guided him, had only explored the middle of the path. This detour was not in terms of cultivation. His efforts were not in vain. Instead, it was in terms of understanding. He had finally reached the end of the path. If Amon had not practiced the so-called power of two sides, he might have had to wait until the last moment of Enkidu's life to suddenly understand it. He closed his eyes again and fell into a deep meditation, completely forgetting everything outside his body and immersing himself in the world of his mind. If he had understood it from the beginning, he would have had more means. But Amon's knowledge and experience could not have come out of thin air. What he learned was the body arts and magic of this world. Of course, he was influenced by everyone's established ideas. It was only today that he fully understood it. Amon recalled the skills of the miners in Duk. In fact, it was the power taught by the gods, and there was no distinction between the so-called body arts and magic. He carefully reflected on the path he had walked step by step. Starting from the simplest first achievement, how to directly practice the power of one side, without the concept of magic or body arts, but only according to the individual's talent. His path of practice was finally clear. The understanding was subversive, and even overturned all previous conclusions. It was a kind of negation. He also found one thing. To awaken this power was much more difficult than to awaken the power of magic and body arts, and even more difficult than to awaken the power of two sides of one body. Who could awaken this power? There was one situation that did not need to be judged, and that was those who had already achieved high achievements. Whether it was a supreme mage or a supreme warrior, they had this aptitude to achieve what they had already achieved. It was nothing more than the difference in the path they had taken. To re-embark on this path, one only needed to understand and confirm and complete the missing practice. Crazy Ol could also embark on this path. Although he still had to pass all kinds of tests and there was almost no hope of success, at least he could understand the goal he had been pursuing all his life. Amon thought of Goliath again. Goliath once said that he and Enkidu were separately trying two other paths, and Amon was confirming the power of two sides of one body. Perhaps they could both solve the secret of becoming gods. This was not entirely unreasonable. The path explored by Crazy Ol, Bear and Amon could be said to be unique. They were constantly approaching the secret of becoming gods, and today they finally understood the origin. In the darkness, Amon forgot the outside world, even his own existence. But tears silently welled up in his eyes. He silently prayed to Nietzsche and Bear, with gratitude and blessings. The hard work of 3 generations of geniuses, and the summary of research on the basis of the experience of countless geniuses had finally solved the mystery, and the answer had always existed in the world. In the following days, Supreme General Amon closed himself off from visitors. Even the servants around him could not see him. Only John knew where he was. He lived in the village built by Moses and the others. He began to train his power again from the lowest level. It was not so much training, but rather experience and mastery, because he had already broken through to the next level. He only had one disciple, John, by his side, so he called John over and said, "I once taught you the mining skills of Duk and the most basic magic meditation. Because of this, you integrated the restless power and became a supreme warrior. Later, I taught you the power of two sides and let you practice magic and body art separately. But today, I want to show you the real path. Abandon all prejudices and follow my instructions. Practice all the powers you have learned in this way." John was surprised and said, "Ammonius, are you going to awaken another power for me?" Amon shook his head and said, "This is not another power. It is what you have been training in the past, but it points to the true origin. It is very difficult to awaken this power, but for those who have already become supreme mages or supreme warriors, they only need to comprehend and experience it again." Amon passed on his latest understanding to John, and John asked another thing. "Ammonius, Miss Phi is an advanced warrior. Can she also practice this power?" Amon smiled and replied, "Not everyone can succeed. She has 2 choices. One is to continue practicing body arts, and after she becomes a supreme warrior, I will guide her to practice this power. The other is to hold the awakening ceremony for her now, and if she succeeds, she will start training from the beginning." John was surprised and overjoyed. "Ammonius, you agree?" Amon nodded. "Yes, but I will not teach her directly. You will teach her what you have verified. I need someone to help me conduct the power awakening ritual, and this person must be able to verify this body's power to the 7th level before I can do it. Go and practice by yourself first. You will personally awaken Miss Phi's power." The latest decree of the empire's Pharaoh Merneptah was quickly passed down to the various cities according to an oracle. After all, there were only a few people like Amon who knew what was going on, and the oracle announced by His Majesty Pharaoh shocked the whole country. The great king of Igut, Horus, was injured in the battle against the evil foreign gods in order to protect the empire, and has returned to heaven to recuperate. Ra, the father of the gods, who was born in the lotus of the beginning and lives above the source of the Nile River, has blessed Igut with glory, and Seth has become the new guardian of the king. It was not easy to change the beliefs of people for thousands of years, but Pharaoh ordered that Ra be promoted to the chief god of the various shrines, and Ra was the father of the gods in the myth of Igut. If Pharaoh wanted to change the beliefs of the shrines, and it was logical to do so, there was no other choice. In the myth of Igut, when the empire was founded, Seth was also the guardian of the king. This did not immediately change people's habits, but it clearly defined the change of the main god through the laws of the world. Another decree issued by Pharaoh Merneptah, according to the oracle, surprised Amun. The decree clearly declared that Ra was the one and only god in the world, while the original gods were uniformly referred to as angels. Seth's identity was the head of the angels, the guardian of Egypt for the gods. The ordinary people could not react for a while, but they could not understand what this meant. Pharaoh not only gave Ra the status of the supreme god, but also became the only god by law, and changed the names of the other gods to angels. Among them, Seth became the most important angel, and actually had the status of the original Horus. Schrödinger was also one of the gods belonging to the Ennead, and she had never even seen Ra. The ancient father of the gods had long since retired. The status of the gods in the Ennead had changed subtly, with Ra becoming the only supreme god, and the rest of the gods, regardless of age, were all under Seth, and Seth became the king of the Ennead. Not only that, but since the decree of Igut only recognized Ra as the only god, the gods of the other pantheons had also become false gods. The other gods in the Ennead, except for Ra, had also lost the title of gods and had changed their title. Amun had another way of thinking about this matter, and he even thought of his disciples calling him Ammonius, and Moses and others also seeing him as the only god, Allah. If one day he became a god beyond the realm of immortality, then his disciples who followed him on this path could also become gods. And this would be a new pantheon. So how to maintain the faith of this pantheon without the collapse of conflict like the Anunnaki pantheon, or the Ennead pantheon? The decree of one god, issued by Pharaoh Merneptah, did provide a solution. This should not have been entirely thought up by Pharaoh out of thin air. He must have received the guidance of some oracle, and at the same time, there must be a very clear practical motive. If it really had something to do with the oracle, the gods would not do inexplicable things, so it must have symbolized something. Unfortunately, this was not something that Amun could understand at the moment, and even Schrödinger could not explain it. The new pharaoh succeeded the throne. In addition to issuing the oracle and the latest national decree, the first specific message turned out to be directed at the supreme general of the empire, Amun, who lived in seclusion in his fief. Amun inexplicably received another reward, and to the west of his existing territory, Pharaoh gave him another fief. This kind of reward did not make much sense. The empire of Igut had a vast territory, and many of the unirrigated wilderness was not suitable for people to live in, nor was it worth using a large population to develop. West of Amun's territory, beyond the river valley, was an uninhabited wilderness since ancient times, and beyond Mount Horeb was the desert. Chapter 170. 154. The River of Blood. Supreme General Amun originally had 5 titles, but now one was cut down to 4. The original first title, the Blessing of the Great God Horus, disappeared, and the other title, Inherit the Glory of an Ra, was raised to the top and changed to Radiate the Glory of an Ra. This change was natural, because Horus had not only lost his status as the king of Igut, but he also no longer had the title of a god, and an Ra had become the only supreme god by law. The monotheistic reform of Merneptah first took the title of the famous supreme general of the empire, Amun, as a test and a declaration. Amun could not say anything more than thanks for the reward, and the ministers of Igut also knew the direction the empire was going. Although it was just a change in the title of the supreme general, its practical role was very important. Amun's achievements and glory were obtained on the battlefield, and he enjoyed a high reputation among the people. There was also a rumor that it was because of the protection of an Ra that the Anare Legion was able to achieve a miraculous victory on the battlefield. The defeat of the Horus Legion, the most elite force of the kingdom, naturally symbolized the injury and retirement of Horus. The legions of the empire were named after the gods, and naturally, there was another meaning. The soldiers believed that the name of the legion was the guardian god on the battlefield. While the Horus Legion lost the first battle, and was almost wiped out, the Anare Legion, which had just been formed from a miscellaneous army, repeatedly made great contributions and saved the empire of Igut from the fate of defeat. Once this rumor was spread, the impact on the people was indeed considerable, and it was also adding fuel to the monotheistic reform of Merneptah Pharaoh. Even if the gods had a divine realm, to turn it into a true realm of divine power, they still needed true faith and offerings. The establishment of a monotheistic system required a corresponding social foundation, and only then could Seth enjoy the status of a true god in the name of an Ra. After Amon wrote back to thank Pharaoh for the reward, Merneptah issued a series of new decrees requiring the city-states to replace the chief god worshipped in their shrines with Ra. The other gods, including Horus, did not cancel the sacrifice, but they had to be ranked after Seth. At the same time, he built a magnificent shrine of Ra in Hilmor, and made Hilmor the new capital of the empire. Merneptah's monotheistic reform also had a very practical significance in the secular world of the Empire of Igut, as it concentrated and strengthened the rule of the monarchy. After going through a war that mobilized the whole nation, the conflicts between the various factions within the empire became more and more obvious, especially the conflicts between the emerging nobles and the aristocrats that had existed for thousands of years. Lazith II's death was too sudden, and Merneptah's position after succeeding the throne was not stable. He was not the eldest son of Lazith II, but the luckiest of the princes, who ascended the throne with the support of powerful ministers. Much of the power of the Empire of Igut was in the hands of the traditional aristocrats represented by the clergy groups, and Merneptah's reform was equivalent to centralization of power. There was a certain difference between the concept of the clergy groups and the concept of the mages. Supreme mages like Maria and George did not belong to this group, but the aristocracy that had risen in recent years. People like Roddick, although not a mage himself, were still the chief priest of the Cape States, holding local military and political power for generations. He was a typical representative of this group. For example, the Ramos family, from which Nero came, was also a member of the clergy groups, and Amon had a strong conflict with this family. If personal factors aside, this was also one of the inevitable contradictions caused by the rise of the new forces represented by Amon. When the position of the royal power was unstable, it was easy for the power to be controlled by the local aristocratic groups. The change in the Ennead divine clan was an opportunity, and Merneptah took the opportunity to carry out the monotheistic reform, which was also a move to weaken the various conflicting forces in the country and strengthen the centralization of power. Changing his own name and establishing a new king were the most important symbols. Merneptah did not touch the temple of Isis in Montefiore for the time being, but according to the oracle and decree, the goddess Isis had also become an angel. Pharaoh gave this angel a special title of Our Lady of Isis, and also gave the original guardian of Isis, Saint Maria, a new title, Guardian of the Angels. The temple of Isis was still dedicated to the Our Lady of Isis, but the most important east and west halls on both sides of the main shrine were rebuilt. The east side, where the sun rose, was dedicated to Ra, while the west side was dedicated to the angels led by Seth. In fact, this was Seth's shrine, and the angels behind it were just a foil to him. As Amon expected, he soon received a warrant from Pharaoh from the city of Harak, summoning the craftsmen of Duk to go to Hilmor to build the main shrine for Ra. Supreme General Amon's first title was Glory to Ra, and he had no reason to refuse such a trivial matter. Otherwise, it would be disrespectful to the gods. Pharaoh ordered the cities to recruit craftsmen, and specifically mentioned the miners of Duk. If Lazith II had not died, and nothing had happened to the Ennead divine clan, after Amon's rampage in Montefiore, most people would not deliberately find fault with him, unless there was conclusive evidence that the Supreme General had committed a serious crime. But now everything had changed, and the power structure of the empire was being reorganized. Prime Minister Joseph was the strongest supporter of the new pharaoh's monotheistic reform, and perhaps he was the one who told Pharaoh where the best craftsmen on the continent were. Even if the prime minister did not say it, Pharaoh himself would have made Amon state his position, as this was both the will of the gods and the direction of the empire's national policy. Amon said apologetically to the emissary of Harak, "I could not have predicted what would happen today. That group of craftsmen has been sent to the territory of the plains of Duk. The emissary said, "This is an order from Pharaoh, and it must be carried out. His Majesty has just awarded you a large territory, but it is only for the requisition of a few dozen slaves. This is the most important matter of the empire at present. Supreme General should recall those slaves immediately." Amon nodded and said, "I will send my guards to recall them immediately." The emissary said, "Thank you, Supreme General. I will wait for news in your territory." John crossed the Nile River with a group of guards and chased Moses and the others along the official road. 2 days later, he returned and reported to Amon with a terrified expression. "Supreme General, it's not good. Your slaves have abandoned their carriages and escaped. We found their abandoned carriages on the official road by the river, as well as their footprints into the mountains and forests. The mountains are too desolate. We have searched all day but have not found them." Amon slapped the table and said, "What, they dared to escape? Continue to search. When you find them, bring them directly to Herak." Then he said to the emissary, "I'm really sorry, those slaves have escaped. Please report to Pharaoh truthfully. I am willing to donate a large sum of money to the empire for the construction of the shrine of Ra. Slaves escape from time to time, and the facts were clear." Supreme General Amon did not lie. He was also a victim, and Amon's donation was not empty talk. He took out the equivalent of 1,000 parangons as a tribute, which was far more than the value of dozens of ordinary slaves. The emissary did not know the inside story and thought that he had completed his mission perfectly. Although the Supreme General's slave had escaped, he had paid 1,000 parangons for it. So after comforting Amon, he returned to the city of Herak and reported the situation to the capital. Unexpectedly, when Pharaoh saw the report, he attached great importance to it and immediately sent an order to reward Supreme General Amon with 200 slaves in recognition of his generous donation to the shrine of Ra, and at the same time to compensate him for the loss of his slaves' escape. Pharaoh also ordered the city-states of the country to assist the Supreme General in recovering the escaped slaves, and specifically emphasized the importance of these craftsmen in the divine prophecy. Amon frowned after receiving the order. Merneptah's move was unusual. It was not as simple as summoning craftsmen, but he wanted this group of people. He actually personally ordered the city-states all over the country for the sake of dozens of escaped slaves. But Pharaoh could not punish the Supreme General himself on the surface. Amon's slaves had escaped, and he had suffered losses, not to mention that he had donated a large sum of money. In the face of such kindness from the empire's Pharaoh, Supreme General Amon was also very grateful, and denounced John and the other incompetent personal guards in his territory. In anger, he dismissed John from his post as the captain of the guards, and wanted to drive him back to Montefiore. John pleaded, "Supreme General, please give me a chance to redeem myself. Although you have dismissed me from my post as the captain of the guards, I still need to make up for my mistakes." Amon nodded and said, "John, you have nothing to do with me anymore. Since you have the desire to help me, for the sake of Pharaoh, I will give you a warrant. You will lead all my guards to search along the official road. Even if you have to chase them out of the borders of Igut, you must find them." John prostrated and bowed. "Thank you, Supreme General. If I can't find them, I will definitely not come to see you." John was dismissed from his post by Amon, and in order to redeem himself, he asked the Supreme General to let him continue to lead his guards to search for the escaped slaves. This was all voluntary, and it looked like he was carrying out Pharaoh's orders. In fact, before this, Amon had privately asked John, "For the sake of dozens of escaped slaves, Pharaoh has issued an order to all the cities in the country. This is not an ordinary action. It seems that I will have to leave Igut sooner or later. After I leave, what will you do?" John replied without thinking, "Of course I will continue to follow Ammonius and bring Miss Phi with me to follow you." Amon smiled. "I'm afraid it will be difficult to leave when the time comes. I will give you 2 choices now. One is to dismiss you from your post as the captain of the guards, and you will no longer have anything to do with me. You can return to Montefiore and continue to be an unemployed general. The second choice is still to dismiss you from your post, but give you a chance to go to where I am going." John, "Of course it is the second choice. To tell you the truth, all your guards have also sworn to follow you to the death. If you leave Igut, Their fates will be very miserable, Supreme General. Please consider it. Amon nodded. You are very thoughtful, then I will let you take all of them and leave. Amon asked John to lead all his guards to chase after the escaped slaves along the official road. It was nothing more than giving them a chance to leave the borders of Igut and head to the plains of Duk. Supreme General Amon had really dismissed all the people around him. His clansmen had all fled, Madanzo and Link had also left, and now even John had left. He did not even leave a single guard behind. He only had the servants of the territory by his side, which was equivalent to living alone in such a huge and unfamiliar territory, but he seemed very calm. Amon had thought it through very clearly. If Pharaoh really wanted to harm him, he could leave at any time, but the people around him would definitely be implicated, so it was better to prepare early. He was now a supreme general without an army, with only a cat by his side to keep him company. Amon did not want to take the initiative to commit treason. If he was convicted of this crime, too many people would be implicated, including his former subordinates and the lords who had recommended him. Moreover, after John left, Amon had already begun to undo the seal on Schrödinger, and there was no time or energy to deal with other things. But the importance that the pharaohs of Igut attached to the pursuit of the Dushians was far beyond ordinary people's expectations. Behind Pharaoh's orders, there was even the shadow of the gods. Moses led his clansmen along the barren mountains on the east bank of the Nile River, through the inaccessible dense forest, from the city of Heliot to the territory of the city of Bubas. Here, the official road turned east, and they had to cross the official road into another mountainous area to avoid being tracked. Moses led his clansmen to hide in the mountains, wanting to wait until late at night when the official road was deserted. However, at night he heard the voice of the oracle again. Madanzo told him that they could not leave at night, and that they had to wait until dawn. Sure enough, that night, several groups of the city guards passed by on the official road with torches in their hands. If they saw Moses and the others, they would not be able to escape. At dawn, Moses heard Madanzo's voice again. You can go now. Moses woke up his sleeping clansmen, quietly went to the official road, and walked along the main road for a distance. This place was far from the town, and the nearby farms were still in deep sleep. There was a cloud in the sky that always hid them. They took the risk to walk through this densely populated open area, and entered another desolate mountainous area. Finally, they breathed a sigh of relief. They had been trudging through the hills full of bushes for several days, and in many places they had to cut down thorns to make a path. Everyone was carrying heavy loads, and even the strongest miners were tired. In the afternoon, they came to a river, a tributary of the Nile River, and an important water source for irrigating the land near the city of Bubas. Moses ordered everyone to stop and rest, and took out utensils to make a fire to cook. They set up a stove and gathered firewood. Moses ordered 6 of the 12 judges to perform magic to prevent the smoke from the fire from rising, so as not to be discovered. As soon as the fire was lit, the clansmen sent to fetch water from the river stumbled back and reported, "Oh no, there was a terrible miracle, the river has turned into blood." Chapter 171. 155. God's punishment. Moses said with a sullen face, "It is because of the guidance of God that we can safely pass through the dangerous area and arrive here. If a changed river can shake our faith, how can we be worthy of God's help? How can we go through all the hardships to return to our homeland?" No one dared to drink the river. Moses raised his iron staff and used water elemental magic to condense the dew on the grass. He ordered his people to continue cooking. While they were cooking, Madanzo and Link hid in a secluded place and whispered. Link said, "Did you see that? Someone used a very clever sensory reversal spell to change the color and smell of the river to scare Moses and his people away." Madanzo frowned and said, "If they don't cross the river, they will have to go back to the main road and go from the east. They will definitely be discovered. This is the purpose of the person who did this. Who could it be?" Link stroked his staff and said, "Ammonius sent John and his guards to leave Igut first. When John passed by, he passed on Ammonius' instructions. Is this what Ammonius is warning us about?" Ammon ordered John to lead 36 guards and leave Igut first. They rode along the main road in the name of pursuing fugitive slaves. Of course, they were much faster than Moses and his people. They had already surpassed them the day before. John found Madanzo and Link in the middle of the night, and told them about Amon's latest plan. Besides letting these two outstanding disciples verify the power of origin that they had just learned, he also told them to pay attention to a few other things. Moses and his people had become fugitives. Pharaoh had ordered all the cities in the country to put them on the wanted list. The difficulties they would face along the way were not only limited to the difficulties they would face. The gods of Egypt were likely to use various means to stop them. The real gods would not directly attack Moses and the others, but they would use various means to create obstacles. To shake their faith, to make them feel fear and discouragement, to lose courage, confidence and hope. If the Dushians no longer believed that they could succeed and gave up on the mission, then the Egyptian gods would have succeeded. Madanzo and Link were secretly trying to resolve these obstacles and encourage Moses and the others not to give up. If the gods' obstruction and intimidation did not succeed, they would probably send messengers to threaten Moses and the others. The messengers of the gods should also be the gods in the legend of Igut, but Amon told Madanzo and Link that those messengers were not real gods who transcended eternal life. They were nothing more than masters of the secret of becoming gods like them, and trained in the power of unity. In this case, Madanzo and Link needed to take action, but there was no need to fight to the death. They could make various agreements to hold them back and let Moses and the others pass safely. If they were really not a match for the Dushians, Amon would not force them to do their best. If these two obstacles could not stop the Dushians, the gods might directly attract the pursuers of Igut, and then they would have to fight directly. It was unrealistic for Madanzo, Link and Moses to defeat the Igut army, but it was also impossible for the Igut army to gather in one place and wait for them. They had to avoid encountering a large number of troops as much as possible. Now that the river had turned into blood and was blocking the way of Moses and the others, even if it could not scare them away, it could make them take a detour. It seemed that Amon's prophecy had come true. Madanzo curled the corner of his mouth and said, "This little trick is not difficult for us. If Moses and the others want to persist, we will help them cross the river." Link said worriedly, "It is not a big problem for now, but this is just the beginning. I wonder what else Moses and the others will encounter." Madanzo, Ammonius said to let them choose for themselves. "As long as they do not give up, we will provide help." Link reminded again, "If the punishment of the gods of Igut does not scare away Moses and the others, it is likely that they will send messengers to directly stop them. I wonder if the two of us are a match for them?" Madanzo patted Link on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't forget, we are also messengers of the gods. Who is afraid of who? Ammonius has finally taught us the power of origin, the true inseparable body. We used to practice the power of two sides, but we still lacked a lot of methods, but now we have mastered it. It is not without its benefits. At least our magic power is much stronger than those of the same level. I have even fought with Enkidu on the battlefield. That is a guy who dares to kill even the gods. Why would I be afraid of the messengers of the gods? Since Ammonius asked us to carry out this task, we must also have confidence." Link laughed. "It is such a big thing. How come it is not a difficult thing when it comes to you?" Madanzo said proudly, "Of course, when Ammonius attacked Hittite and captured the king alive. Why did he only bring me?" That night, the worried Moses was praying to the gods when he heard the voice of the messenger. "Moses, when the light appears on the horizon and the morning mist rises from the forest, lead your people to cross the river." Moses quickly got up and found the 12 judges and instructed, "The messengers of the gods told me that when the morning mist rises, we can cross the river in front of us. Let the people get ready immediately." Someone asked. Now everyone is very afraid, thinking that it is the punishment of the gods of Igut, and they dare not go to the river again. What should we do? Moses replied, "Tell them that it is the path guided by the gods. We only believe in our gods. If they do not want to go, they can turn back. I am willing to be the first to cross the river." When the light appeared on the horizon, there was a faint morning mist floating in the forest. Moses gathered his people and walked to the river, and the mist slowly followed them. The rushing river was still red and exuded the smell of blood, but the morning mist floated out of the forest like a thin blanket on the river. Gradually, the white mist on the river became thicker and thicker, and under the cover of the morning mist in the forest, it turned into the shape of a pontoon bridge. Moses waved his staff and said, "This is the path that the gods have guided us to cross the river. As long as the faith in our hearts is firm, we can walk to the other side. Only one person can cross at a time." Everyone looked at the condensed mist, and many people did not dare to go over. How could they step on the mist? If they stepped on it, wouldn't they fall into the river? Just as Moses was about to go, a clansman said, "Moses, I know that the gods have given you strength, but we don't. How can we cross the water? Do you want to leave us?" Moses stopped and said, "Everyone can cross. Since you said so, I will be the last to cross. Who will go first?" His servant Joshua lifted the corner of his robe and was ready to cross the bridge. The youngest child of the clansmen, David, suddenly came out and said, "My faith in going home has never wavered. I will go first." Then he ran over. His father Jonah just shouted, "David, be careful." The child had already disappeared into the thick mist. Only one person could cross at a time. This was the order of the gods. Everyone waited anxiously. After a while, David's voice came from the other side. "I have crossed, it will be fine. This bridge is amazing, it is like stepping on the clouds." The people breathed a sigh of relief when they heard David's words. One by one, they crossed the magical bridge. Moses was the last to reach the other side. Everyone looked back. The sun was shining through the gaps in the treetops. The mist had dissipated, and the river was clear again. The people smiled. They had crossed the river. Link unfolded the crystal shuttle and spread it on the surface of the river to guide the Dushians across. The crystal shuttle could still change in such a way, which showed that his method of controlling the artifact had become more refined than before. Amon's new understanding of the power of inseparability was fundamentally to forget the concept of the so-called body arts or magic arts. To control the crystal shuttle, one had to achieve at least the 7th level. But Link realized that if the crystal shuttle was turned into a mist bridge, in fact, the 4th level was enough. It was not that the power was more powerful, but the way of using it was different. Madanzo stood guard at the side, in case of any accidents during the crossing. Only when everyone had crossed the river did the two quietly put away the shuttle and leave. Madanzo smiled at Link. "That boy named David is really good." He did not panic at all when he stepped on the transmogrified shuttle for the first time at such a young age. Although he was full of questions, his steps were very steady. His aptitude is rare. Moses awakened the power of two sides for the people. Why did he miss out? Link replied, "I also paid attention to this boy. He is still too young, only 14 this year. According to the tradition of Duk, one can only learn the skills of mining at the age of 16. It is also a good foundation for practicing the power of two sides. This boy has not learned it yet, so Moses did not awaken his power. From what you said, you seem to be very interested in this boy." Madanzo nodded. "I am very optimistic about him. It is indeed not suitable for him to learn the skills of mining at such a young age. Without a mature bloodline, it is difficult to withstand the impact of the power. Only a few talented people are exceptions. Since Ammonius has imparted his latest insights to you and me, I also want to try taking in a disciple to awaken David's power. He has not learned any magic or body arts, and has no prejudices in his heart. It is suitable for him to start from scratch." Link glanced at him and said, "You really like to be in the limelight." Ammonius wanted John to try the awakening ceremony, starting with Miss Fi. But you were the first to get the itch and chose this David. Madanzo said thoughtfully, "I have experienced all kinds of awakening ceremonies. The first was in the capital of Babylon, where I experienced the ceremony to awaken the bloodline of warriors. Later, in your tribe, Ammonius awakened the power of two sides for me. After saving Princess Sisela and returning to Babylon, Her Highness, in order to reward me, ordered people to hold a second awakening ceremony for me. There are so many complicated ceremonies, but Ammonius only came up with a name to include all of them. It is called the Awakening of Power." Link sighed. Ammonius is really amazing to be able to point out the origin. But the awakening of power is not easy to succeed. For those who do not have the aptitude, they can still use the original ceremonies to achieve limited achievements. Even if they know the secret of becoming a god, most people will not be able to become a god. It is just a matter of distance. But as long as one has worked hard in life, life is not a pity. Moses and the rest followed the wilderness of the Nile Valley, bypassing the main city of Bubas, and entered the territory of Danis. Further ahead was the estuary of the Nile River. This river was divided into many thin streams that spread out in a fan shape, forming a delta that was flooded during the season. They walked along the wetlands of the triangle for a few more days, and when they were not far from the coastline, they turned east and continued walking. They did not encounter any more accidents along the way, and the tribesmen heaved a sigh of relief. The weather was relatively humid, and when they camped at night, Moses ordered the tribesmen to set up tents and be careful not to catch a cold. That night, when everyone was sleeping soundly, they suddenly heard a scream of horror, which was followed by a cacophony of screams. Everyone woke up and ran out of their tents in panic. It turned out that countless frogs had climbed ashore from the nearby streams and got into the tents, beds, utensils, and even people's clothes. How did these frogs appear? Even the few judges who were on guard at night did not notice. Everyone was awakened by the frogs and jumped out of their bedding in fear. Some people even took out a few frogs from their crotches and threw them out. The camp was a little quiet, and countless frogs began to croak. The croaking noise made people dizzy, and they could not even hear each other clearly. One or two frogs were not scary, but countless frogs appeared densely, jumping everywhere, and the croaking of the frogs echoed in the wilderness. This was a terrifying scene that made people's scalps tingle. Moses slammed his cane on the ground, and an invisible force drowned out the croaking of the frogs. He shouted to the tribesmen, "What are you panicking for? Even the frogs are like this. What will you do if you encounter a real enemy? Pack up and continue moving out." This section of the road was relatively wet and muddy. There were many small streams along the way, and there were large and small pools everywhere. No one knew where so many frogs came from, but they kept croaking loudly, making people feel uneasy. Moses had the 12 judges raise their iron staves and take turns to open the way, driving away the swarm of frogs in front of them. But every night when they were camping, frogs would constantly jump out of the trees and cracks in the rocks. These little things were slippery, and they would sneak into the cups they drank, the blankets they slept in, and the clothes they wore. It was simply impossible to guard against. The 12 judges tried their best to drive them away, but there were just too many frogs. Although they did not hurt anyone, they disturbed everyone and made it impossible for them to rest. After a few days, everyone was exhausted. This kind of torture was really unbearable. The further they went, the more the disturbance from the frogs became, as if it would never stop. The tribesmen were suffering unspeakably. Of course, Madanzo and Link also noticed, and the two secretly discussed what to do. Link said, "In the legends of Igut, there is a frog goddess called Hecate, who is said to be a servant of Seth. Could it be that she did it?" Chapter 172. 156, Frog Goddess Hecate. Link frowned. Her purpose is clear, that is to disturb Moses and the others. Frogs don't bite, but they can annoy people to death until they are exhausted and can't hold on any longer. Sooner or later, they will panic and stop moving forward. No one can withstand endless torture, and wear down their courage and perseverance bit by bit. If they break down, Seth will have succeeded. Madanzo spat. What a ruthless method, driving so many frogs out to annoy me. I can't even find an opponent to fight. There are too many frogs, there's no end to them. Link said solemnly, "If Frog Goddess Hecate doesn't show up, we don't have to show up either. This is a test for Moses and the others, and they must overcome this difficulty. As long as they cross the Nile River and reach a dry area, Hecate naturally won't be able to drive so many frogs. At the current speed, I'm afraid it will take a few more days." Madanzo said, "This is a test of faith and will. It depends on how strong their will is, and whether they can persist in this kind of environment. I found that David is really a good child, he eats and sleeps well. The calmer a person is, the less likely they are to be disturbed by this kind of torture. Link smiled. The frogs are helping you to test people. Are you going to guide that child in the next few days? Madanzo smiled. I've never eaten frogs since I was a child, but when I came to your tribe, I learned that frogs can also be eaten, and they are so delicious. Now I'm craving them again. Panic and unease gradually spread among the tribesmen, and the continuous torture caused them to fall into a trance. Some people said that this was a punishment from the gods of Igut, but where was their god, Allah? The 12 judges tried their best but could not completely drive away the ubiquitous frogs. It was a bit like the scene when Amon and Madanzo encountered scorpions in the desert. Many people could not walk anymore and said to Moses, "We are not complaining, most of us are strong, but we can't take it and can't rest. Is this the punishment from the gods of Igut? Why do they torture us like this? Take us away from the forest and those pools." Moses advised, "We can't leave the forest yet, or we'll be discovered by our pursuers." This is exactly what the evil god Igut wants to achieve. All of you are calling out to Allah, but have you ever thought about what you should do? Don't stop. Leave the delta wetlands as soon as possible. The longer you stay here, the more torture you'll suffer. Gather round me, all of you, and let me raise my staff to bless you, and wash away your weariness and restlessness. Moses and his people did not stop. Although they were exhausted, they still followed the path that God had pointed out. On this day, David was sleeping in the midst of the croaking of the frogs. Suddenly he heard a voice in his mind. "David, child of Duk, the messenger of the gods is calling you. Please leave the tent quietly and go to the place where the frogs are the loudest. No one will find you." David was really brave. For the past few days, everyone had been panicking when they heard the croaking of the frogs, but he dared to enter the forest where the frogs were the loudest in the middle of the night. The judges on night watch were also tired, and did not notice David sneaking out of the tent. David walked through the dense forest. The croaking of the frogs suddenly quieted down, as if they had retreated to a place far away. Then he saw a fire beside a stream, and a man sitting beside the fire. This person was wearing a cloak that covered his face. He was holding a thin and long golden weaving shuttle in his hand. A bunch of freshly washed and peeled frogs were skewered on the golden weaving shuttle. The frogs were being roasted on the fire with a sizzling sound. His other hand was sprinkling salt on them. The air was filled with the fragrance of humans. David was shocked and asked, "Who are you? Why are you roasting frogs? Can they be eaten?" Madanzo asked, "First tell me who you are and why you are here." David replied, "I am David Solomon, a warrior of the town of Duk. Under the guidance of our God, I have completed my vow to return to my hometown. The messenger of God Allah has summoned me." Madanzo stood up and said with a smile, "I am the messenger of God. These frogs have tortured you for so many days. Do you dare to eat them?" David knelt down and said, "As long as you eat them, I will eat them." Madanzo tore off a frog and ate it happily under the shadow of the cloak. Then he handed the golden weaving shuttle in his hand to David. "Child, are you hungry? The taste is very good." David reached out and took down a roasted frog. He gently bit off a piece and tasted it. Then he stuffed the whole string of frogs into his stomach and ate with relish. Madanzo looked at him with a smile. When he finished eating, he asked, "Is it delicious?" David nodded and said, "Delicious, very delicious." Madanzo asked again, "Are you still afraid of them?" David shook his head and said, "No, I have never been afraid. Messenger of God, did you summon me here to treat me to such a delicious meal, and tell me that I don't have to be afraid of frogs?" Madanzo smiled and said, "Yes, but I have something else to do. This is our little secret. Don't tell anyone else." From that day on, Madanzo awakened David's power, but he never revealed his face. He only said that he was the messenger of God Allah. David asked him what kind of power it was. Madanzo replied that it was the power of faith, which required people to practice with firm faith. David then asked Madanzo about the frogs. Madanzo explained, "Those are the messengers sent by the evil god Igut. They want to stop the Dushans and shake your faith." David pleaded, "Messenger of God, could you please drive those frogs away?" Madanzo shook his head and said, The frogs live in this wetland. You will encounter them when you pass by. This is a difficulty that you have to overcome. If the messenger of the evil god acts directly, the messenger of God will stop him. But you can't expect to get everything from God without paying anything. Including the power I taught you today, it is also given by God, but you can only practice on your own. The next day, when David returned to the camp, his father Jonah ran to him and hugged him, saying, "Son, where have you been? Everyone is worried. If I don't see you soon, Lord Moses will send people to find you." David raised a branch in his hand, on which there was a string of cleaned frogs. He said, "I'm going to find something to eat. Roast them on the fire and sprinkle some salt. They taste really good." The people around him said in horror, "David, how can you eat such things? They are sent by the demons to torture us. Be careful, or you will be poisoned." David smiled and said, "I already ate them last night. They were delicious. What are you afraid of?" Moses walked over and patted David's head, saying, "You are very brave and did a good job. If no one wants to eat them, you can eat them yourself." After walking like this for another 5 days, the group finally left the edge of the wetland of the Nile River Triangle. In front of them were rolling dry hills with grass and shrubs, and the croaking of the frogs finally faded away. Link and Medanzo stood on a treetop and watched Moses and the others walk into the area where there were no frogs. Suddenly, they felt a powerful force behind them. Link whispered, "Hecate has appeared, and she is in the jungle. Is she going to attack us directly?" Medanzo pulled out the key of destiny from thin air, and with a wave of his hand, he put on the scorpion shell armor. He turned around and said with a cold face, "My hands are also itching. I have been waiting impatiently for a long time." Link also turned around and quietly reminded, "Be careful, this Hecate's stealth magic is better than ours. We have not been able to find his hiding place even after so many days." Medanzo sneered, "Of course there are frogs everywhere. He can completely hide his aura. I suspect that he is a mutant frog demon, just like Elmar, who is born with the ability to sneak around in the environment he grew up in. If Elmar hides in the swamp and hides his aura, it will be difficult for us to find him. But if he wants to attack us, the situation will be different." As he spoke, countless water droplets floated up from the leaves, the puddles, and the nearby streams into the air. The droplets were like transparent pearls that reflected a bright light under the sunlight. It was a beautiful sight. A person walked out from the grass, and from the looks of it, it was a young man. This person was wearing a green robe covered with dark brown stripes. His eyes were a little round and bulging, but he could be considered handsome. However, there were a few brownish-green stripes on his cheeks and forehead, as if they were painted with oil. They reflected a faint luster, appearing strange and mysterious. As soon as this person appeared, the floating water droplets began to glow, and gradually elongated in the air, turning into transparent arrows. Countless water arrows were ready to be fired, all aimed at Medanzo and Link. Medanzo pointed at the person with the key of destiny and asked, "Is this Hecate?" The newcomer was slightly startled. "So you know me? Since you know it's me, why don't you put down your weapons and salute me?" Medanzo narrowed his eyes and said, "Why? Lord Frog Angel, you have been the one causing trouble for the past few days, right? What makes you think that we will put down our weapons and salute you? To be honest, we don't know you, and we don't want to know you. We just thought of you when we saw those frogs." Hecate also narrowed her eyes. Her pupils were also greenish-brown, like vertical slits on her eyeballs. "You are indeed not ordinary mortals. Not only are you not panicking after seeing the legendary Hecate, you even dare to speak like this?" Medanzo shrugged. "I have seen those so-called gods who have transcended eternal life, but they are not my gods, let alone you. Who ordered you to come here? And why are you disturbing those suffering tribesmen?" Hecate's figure was submerged in a sea of transparent water arrows. The arrows that filled the sky were filled with power, but in the end, they were not fired. She looked at Medanzo, then at Link and shouted with slight surprise, "Are you the disciples of the Scorpion King Jirishui? No wonder you obtained the power bestowed by the gods. But this is the Igut, and I am the emissary of Seth, the King of Angels. How dare you stop me?" Link did not speak, but he was not idle either. At the same time that the water droplets in the forest turned into arrows, a bow floated in front of him. The bowstring was pulled and turned into a series of shadows, turning into many strings. The bow looked like a harp. Dozens of arrows flew out, densely packed on the bowstring. They were arrows made from the stinger of a giant mutant scorpion. He and Madanzo were also wearing scorpion shell armor, so it was no wonder that Hecate would misunderstand. Madanzo shook his head. Whose emissary we are has nothing to do with you. And whose emissary you are also has nothing to do with us. Those poor people have not done anything wrong, and have never offended you. So why are you torturing them? Hecate apparently misunderstood Madanzo's words as a tacit agreement, and showed a look of contempt. The Scorpion King Jirashui himself has not yet obtained the qualification to join the Anunnaki divine clan, and it is even more impossible for you to follow him. A demigod exiled in the desert, who has no divine clan to rely on, sent an emissary here to make an enemy of me. Don't you think it's ridiculous? I see that the two of you have some achievements. Put down your weapons and swear to follow me, and I can consider introducing you to the Angel King Seth, and perhaps you will have a chance to join the Ennead. Please kneel and thank me. The background of his words was very complicated. When the War of the Gods broke out in the Anunnaki divine clan, Tiamat and Kingu were on the losing side, while Enlil and Marduk were on the winning side. Legend had it that Tiamat created 9 kinds of monsters in the war, including the 9-headed snake Humbaba, the human-faced scorpion Jirashui, and the giant lion Yugalu. These 9 kinds of monsters were naturally defeated, some were killed, some were subdued, and some went into exile. These monsters were very powerful, and after Enlil and the others won, they did not want to pay a huge price to kill them all. It would be best if they could subdue them for their own use, or if they could make them swear not to be enemies again, so that they would not have to fight so hard. Humbaba was subdued by Enlil, and became the guardian of the divine realm, so he could be considered to have joined the Anunnaki divine clan. The human-faced scorpion Jirashui was forced to promise that he would no longer be enemies with Enlil and the others, but he also did not surrender to them, so he was exiled to the desert, and lost the right to be introduced into the Anunnaki divine clan, while he himself became known as the Scorpion King. After the war, both Marduk and Enlil took a fancy to him, and allowed him to join the Anunnaki divine clan. But Yugalu fell in love with the goddess Murin, and as a result, because of a well-known curse, he eventually left in sadness and became the Flowing Lion King. Jirashui was very powerful, but he was an exiled demigod, and he was neither a god who transcended eternal life, nor could he be accepted by the divine clan. In the eyes of the official members of the divine clan, his emissary was certainly following the wrong person. Hecate gave Madanzo and Link a chance to put down their weapons and swear to follow her, and she could introduce them to Seth, and perhaps they could be introduced into the Ennead divine clan. Chapter 173. 157. Being a fraud. Link finally spoke. We are not your enemy, but you are our enemy. We have our own god, and he is unique. Please do not say such blasphemous words in front of me. If you want to make a move, then please do it. Hecate looked at the key of destiny in Madanzo's hand, and then at Link's strange divine bow. The power of the key of destiny was needless to say. It was once Enkidu's god-slaying sword, but now it had become a golden shuttle that no craftsman in the world could forge. And Link's bow was once used by Amon. Later, when Amon obtained Gilgamesh's bow, he gave this famous battle bow to Link, and Link spent another 6 months refining it to make it even more magical. If they really fought, regardless of whether they could win or not, the price would not be small. Hecate blinked her big eyes and suddenly laughed. 2 emissaries, you are no match for me, but I don't want to be enemies with you. You have followed Girth to achieve what you have today, and you should understand the agreement between the gods. We can also make an agreement. I will complete my mission, and you will complete yours. Metatro nodded and asked, what agreement? Hecate replied, those people themselves are not guilty, but they wanted to escape from Igut, and the Angel King Seth has decided to punish them. And for them, it is also a trial and tribulation that they have to go through. I will not directly harm them, but I will create all kinds of obstacles according to the orders of the Angel King, and you can do your best to resolve them. Madanzo gave Link an inquiring look, and Link nodded and replied, "Okay, let's see what we can do." Hecate laughed again. "I wish you good luck. The Scorpion King Girth's temper is not very good, and if you can't complete your mission, you may end up worse than those miners. If you regret it, you can still come to me. Let me remind you, the Angel King Seth did not only send me as an emissary. My mission has actually been completed, and there are others ahead of me." After she finished speaking, the countless water arrows turned back into water droplets, emitting a colorful glow under the sunlight. Countless interwoven rays of light covered Hecate's figure, and then the water droplets fell back down. The forest returned to normal, and Hecate disappeared, along with her powerful aura. Metatro looked at the place where he disappeared and snorted. So his mission has already been completed, but he purposely appeared to scare us. After spouting so much nonsense, he actually wanted to take in disciples, but he took a fancy to us. Link laughed. This person doesn't even understand the situation, and thinks that we were sent by the Scorpion King. No matter whose emissary we are, if we betray our mission because of a few words from him, how can we achieve greater? Madanzo looked at the sky. He just wants to take in 2 powerful subordinates for himself. As for being able to join the Ennead and so on, those are all deceptive terms. It's just that I don't quite understand what he said. It seems like he's trying to be mysterious. Link thought for a moment. It doesn't matter whether you understand or not. It may not be something we can understand, and Ammonius will tell us sooner or later. Hecate said that there are still emissaries sent by Seth ahead of them. Who knows what kind of people they will be? Madanzo shook the key of destiny. Who cares? The road is under Moses's feet, we'll see. Moses and the others finally got rid of the frogs and entered the hilly area between the coastline and the main city of Danis. The terrain was undulating, and there were lush thorns and trees as tall as 2 people. The strong miners pulled out their machetes to open a path. And although they did not walk too fast, they could finally sleep in peace. They walked like this for another 5 or 6 days, and many people's clothes were torn by the thorns, so they simply mended them and continued on their way. The trees were not tall, and the mountains were not steep, but they were so densely packed that there was no end in sight. That night, David heard Madanzo's summons again, and quietly ran to a valley to meet him. Madanzo had awakened the child's power, and had been teaching him all kinds of magical magic. On this day, when David closed his eyes and listened to Madanzo's teachings through message magic, he was a little restless. Not because his mind was not strong enough, but because his body was always feeling troubled. His test had arrived, and it was the purity of the body, and only by passing this test could he master the 2nd level of achievement. During this process, the various hidden dangers and injuries in the body would act up, and of course, it would be very uncomfortable, but one had to persevere in their training in order to get through it. Madanzo was very pleased. David Solomon's aptitude was very good. He was very smart, and he mastered his power very quickly. Madanzo did not notice anything unusual at first, and only comforted the child to overcome all kinds of discomfort. But he suddenly felt that something was wrong today, because David could not help but scratch his body with his hands. He said, "Child, untie your clothes, let me take a closer look." David untied his clothes, and Madanzo was slightly surprised. "What's with these little red spots?" David explained with some embarrassment. "There are a lot of mosquitoes, fleas, and all kinds of small insects in the mountains. If I don't pay attention while walking or sleeping, I will be bitten. It's not a problem. I will definitely focus on practicing meditation and not be distracted." After David left, Madanzo found Link and said, "There's a new situation. Someone is driving the fleas and mosquitoes in the camp to bite Moses and the others. There are a lot of fleas in the mountains. It's normal to be bitten a few times if you don't pay attention, but there are too many red spots on David's body. Obviously someone is playing tricks." Link spat. "This method is too sinister. Even we didn't notice. Moses and the others are strong, and they are very tired every day, so they don't feel much when they are bitten. But these little insects may spread a plague, and it will be too late by the time we react." Madanzo nodded. "We need to investigate and see if there are more fleas and mosquitoes around Moses's camp than in other places." The two quietly searched the wilderness and found that where Moses and the others were camping, the number of mosquitoes and fleas was dozens of times more than in other places. These small insects, which were very common in the wilderness, were hiding under leaves, in the grass, and in the mud. If one did not deliberately search for them, it would be impossible to attract attention. Link said. It could be another messenger sent by Seth, or it could be Hecate. I don't know the other methods of that frog demon, but he should have a way of controlling all kinds of insects. Aren't mosquitoes the frog's food? Madanzo frowned. The power I practice is more suitable for fighting, and my healing magic is not as good as yours. It seems that you will have to work harder this time. In the middle of the night, Moses, who was meditating, heard the voice of the divine messenger. Link told him, "The evil god of Igut has sent messengers to punish you, and they have used underhanded methods to make you suffer from countless mosquito and flea bites until you are infected with the plague. From today onwards, when you are camping, use magic to clean up the surrounding area, and take turns to cast healing magic on everyone, to prevent trouble before it happens." Moses replied, "Thank you for the reminder, divine messenger. I have also felt that there have been a lot of small insects these days, and although I am not afraid, many of my people have been bitten to no end. But if I cast healing magic, my magic power may be limited, and I am afraid I cannot completely stop the plague." Link said, "This is just the beginning. I want you to be prepared for anything. The disciples of God Allah have never been stingy with their magic power, and are even used to it. Go ahead and cast it. Just be careful not to exhaust your power. I will help you in secret. There is also a kind of grass in the mountains. I will tell you what it looks like. Send your people to gather it, and order the 12 judges to dry it with fire magic. After burning it, it can drive away mosquitoes. Every day when you are camping, let the people on night duty put the hay in a circle and smoke it around the camp." Link was the tribe leader of the savages, and since he was a child, he knew that there were a few kinds of grass in the mountains that could smoke away mosquitoes when dried. He happened to find one here, and ordered Moses to send his people to collect it. From that day onwards, whenever it was time for Moses to rest, he would order the 6 judges to take turns to set up a magic formation, and he would hold the iron stick in his hand to preside over the formation, so that his people would gather around and bathe in the light falling from the sky. Every time Moses cast a spell, there would always be a mist floating over, making the light of the staff softer and denser. That was Link's help in secret. The messenger of the gods guided the people of Duk to get rid of the inconspicuous fleas and mosquitoes, but even a wise man would still make a mistake. When Madanzo and the others realized that something was wrong, it was a little too late. Although Moses and the others did not fall ill, the cows, horses, and donkeys they carried fell ill one after another and died one by one. Without animals to carry supplies, the people had to carry everything on their backs. Fortunately, a small part of the food they had carried along the way had been consumed, and they could barely carry all of it. But they had lost food that could be slaughtered at any time, and they were carrying heavier things on their backs, making it more difficult to walk. One day, they walked out of the dense forest and came to an open valley. There was a lake in front of them, and the shore of the lake was covered with soft grass. After a long journey, everyone was tired, so they unloaded their bags and lay down on the soft grass to rest. Moses also saw that everyone was very tired, so he told Joshua to let everyone eat more today. They soaked the bread in the soup until it was soft, and took out the pickled dried meat from their bags, cut it into slices, and roasted it on the stones. The smell of food permeated the shore of the lake, and the people showed a rare relaxed smile. They had not felt this comfortable for a long time. But suddenly Moses frowned. He heard a buzzing sound. It turned out that a few flies flew out of the forest, and then more and more flies flew out and landed on the half-cooked pickled meat that was roasted on the hot stones. Then someone shouted, "What's so stinky?" The aroma of the pickled meat on the stones turned into a rancid smell, and they could only watch helplessly as they rotted. The rancid smell spread from everyone's body. They opened the bags and found that all the food inside had also rotted. Even the dry bread and pickled meat were no exception. These food had been specially processed for long-term preservation, and would not rot even after a year. How could it suddenly spoil? Divine punishment. This was the punishment of the gods. Without food, they could not walk out of Igut. If they did not want to starve to death in the wilderness, they could only turn themselves into the city. Madanzo stood in the distant forest, his face livid, and said, "They actually used this method." Although they did not directly attack the miners, is there a difference? Link also said, "If that's the case, we can also do it directly." Fortunately, Ammonius was prepared. Let Moses perform a miracle. Moses, who had always been calm, was shocked. The power of the evil god Igut was too strong. It could actually cause all the food that the people carried to rot without them knowing. The people who had not given up after suffering finally felt despair. They looked at each other's eyes and sat down on the grass dejectedly. Moses was about to stand up when he heard Link's voice. "Since the evil god's emissary has done this, you should use the means that the gods have prepared. Give them true confidence and show our miracle." Moses raised his staff and shouted, "My people, do not be depressed. The evil god that took away our food is just like the rotten food, emitting a rancid smell. The true gods are protecting us, and will show their miracle. All the people who are devout believers in Allah, please gather around me and accept the food that the gods have bestowed." The people gathered. Moses stretched out his hand and took out a piece of pine bread and a piece of bread, and said to the people, "This is the food that the gods have bestowed upon us. It is unprecedentedly delicious." Someone cried out in disappointment, "That's all? It's not even enough for one person." Moses smiled and said, "The gods will not let us down. Everyone go make the fire and cook the soup. Our gods will show their miracle." A pot of soup was ready. Moses put the secret delicious pine bread into the soup, then broke the bread and threw it in. He quietly used spatial magic to protect the pot. The smell of people permeated the grass, and the people couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Moses said to David, "The youngest can eat first. David, serve the soup first. Don't look at the others, the gods let you go first." David carried a plate full of fragrant soup and instant bread, but the soup in the pot was not reduced at all. One by one, the people came to Moses to receive their food. Until everyone was full, Moses still had a pot full of soup in front of him. Finally, Moses finished the pot of soup himself, then went to the lake to wash his hands and utensils, and said to the people, "Everyone pray with me, thank our God. Thank him for giving us food, and the confidence and courage to overcome all difficulties." The people gathered around Moses and prayed to the only God in their hearts, Allah. Madanzo and Link stood in the trees in the distance and looked at each other and smiled. This miracle had actually been prepared a long time ago. The bread and pine bread had been stored in the ventuculum in the iron staff. Chapter 174. 158. I am a cat. When Moses and others embarked on a journey of suffering, what was Ammon, their god, doing? Ammon sent messengers to guide them on the way back to their hometown. After years of hard work and preparation, when the day really came, Ammon himself had no time to care. A cat, the cat upstream from the temple of Isis Square hundreds of years ago, was Ammon at the moment. It was not that Ammon went back to hundreds of years ago, nor did he become a cat. This was a very special state of meditation. Perhaps it was not appropriate to call it meditation. After experiencing the test of losing power and growing up again, if there was anything different, it was that the current Ammon was the self that he had been pursuing since he was born. Only by confirming this state could he reach a state where nothing existed, where his body and the world turned into nothingness. Schrödinger squatted in front of Ammon and unreservedly opened her spiritual world to Ammon. Ammon was experiencing Schrödinger's past. He was not simply seeing or hearing, but feeling everything as Schrödinger himself. During this process, he had to be absolutely calm and forget himself. There could not be a trace of disturbance in his mind. Otherwise, everything he experienced would become unreal. This was why Schrödinger waited until today. In this state, she was also unreservedly opening up all her secrets. Therefore, Schrödinger had to find someone she could absolutely trust. The people of Igut liked cats. This was a very old tradition. Cats came to Igut and solved the rat infestation in many places. They were regarded as the servants of the god of fertility. Therefore, around the Temple of Isis Square, people had always had the habit of feeding cats. There were many stray cats living here, and Schrödinger was one of them. Cats had a wide variety of food. In addition to eating food from people, they also ran around to catch mice, birds, termites, grasshoppers, and other flying insects. It was very difficult for an ordinary person to imagine eating a live rat, but all the feelings were real. Under such circumstances, he was still able to not have a single thought, and not have a single thought. This was the current Amon. This was a curious kitten. It was not afraid of humans, but it had a natural sense of alienation from humans. It would not get too close to them. Whenever various ceremonies were held in the square and people gathered, the cats would disappear without a trace. But one day, Schrödinger was chasing a flying beetle, and forgot about its surroundings. When it came back to its senses, it found itself surrounded by feet. It was caught in the crowd and had nowhere to hide. It was frightened. A kitten wrapped in the surging crowd could be trampled to death. Just as it was overwhelmed with fear, it realized that everyone around it had stopped moving and knelt down in one direction. Ethereal singing came from the sky, and the temple bell rang melodiously. The cat looked up and saw the golden sky. There was a soft light sprinkling on its body. It was an indescribable magical feeling. The cat actually forgot its fear and stopped shivering. It was as if an invisible hand was caressing the depths of its soul. It just happened to be in time for the annual blessing of Isis. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps it was a sudden enlightenment, but at its most frightened moment, it experienced the blessing of Isis. At that moment, it seemed to vaguely understand something. Since then, the cat often slipped into the temple. Its simple intelligence could not make complex thoughts. It was only searching for the familiar feeling in its memory, in the singing of the priests, under the gaze of the statue. The cat's intuition was much sharper than that of humans. It remembered the singing and participated in many temple ceremonies. The priest thought that the kitten was very interesting. Instead of playing in the square, it was willing to come to the temple to watch the various ceremonies of the priests. It was like a small priest. After getting familiar with it, no one cared about it. People even gave it a name, Batet. Batet did not know how many awakening ceremonies it had experienced, including many second awakening ceremonies held by supreme mages for supreme warriors, as well as various blessings. Of course, it was not the protagonist of the ceremony, but a kitten standing at the feet of people watching the fun. The priests in the temple already knew the habits of the cat, so they did not banish it. Instead, they thought it was very interesting. A cat's lifespan was usually only a decade or so, but this kitten had lived for nearly 100 years. It did not know that it had such a long life, and all its actions were purely instinctive. The long years gradually gave it clear memories, which opened up the ability to think, and thinking made it spontaneously learn and understand. It did not know when it started, but when it lay on the bookshelf and watched the priests teach hieroglyphs, it suddenly realized that it had actually listened to them countless times, and understood the hieroglyphs word by word. These were not memories of Schrödinger, but traces imprinted in its soul. Amon unfolded his soul to open these imprints, and just like Schrödinger, he experienced all this for many years. When Schrödinger suddenly realized that he understood hieroglyphs, exactly one night had passed in the real world. This was a concept that was difficult for people to understand, as if it was a paradox of time. Amon had only sat for one night, but he had experienced many years. Time did not slow down nor did it speed up, but the imprints in Schrödinger's soul had unfolded so much. If he did not have the achievements he had today, not only would it be difficult for him to accept it, but his consciousness might also be shattered into pieces. When the sky was just beginning to brighten, Amon opened his eyes. After experiencing this night, he felt that his soul had become both powerful and weak at the same time. Being powerful referred to being able to contain more in a single thought. Just like reading a book, a single glance could imprint the entire volume into one's mind, even clearer than an ordinary person studying it carefully. Being weak referred to having consumed too much energy, and having reached his limit. If he did not stop, Amon would very likely be completely lost in Schrödinger's imprints, and enter a deep state of coma. Amon exhaled deeply. and asked with a weary voice, "This is where you came from? You made me experience all this in order to undo the seal that imprisoned me?" Schrödinger shook his head. "No, this is only the beginning. I need you to clearly understand everything I've experienced. Only then will you be able to find the seal that imprisoned me." Amon was a little surprised. "What seal? You don't even know? Then how do I undo it?" Schrödinger sighed. "It's in my imprints. When I unfolded my soul to you, my consciousness was stagnant, and I don't know exactly what you've experienced. Only in this way can you perceive it more clearly than I do. What did you understand just now?" Amon smiled. "The me just now was you back then. After opening my eyes, I thought of a person. Well, it can't be said to be a person, it should be said to be an ironback." Amon thought of Elmar, because Elmar had learned hieroglyphs not long ago. How could an ironback know how to write? In fact, Amon did not understand, he only let Link teach it. But now he was witnessing the entire process of a cat awakening its intelligence. There was a great coincidence that even the cat itself was unaware of, like the light in the sky suddenly illuminating something. Schrödinger's expression was a little startled. "So you've experienced so much? Then there's the real confusion. As a cat, I didn't understand what kind of existence I was. You need a good rest, and after you recover, go and experience it again." Amon rested for a whole day, and that night he still felt that he had not recovered. It was not that his magic power was exhausted, but a kind of tiredness made it difficult for him to accommodate the imprint in another soul. Schrödinger patiently waited for him for another 2 days. And on the 3rd day he started again. When the cat realized that it could read hieroglyphs and even write the name Batet with its claws, its way of thinking changed, and its real confusion began. This cat did not know what kind of existence it was, and it was obviously different from other cats. When it woke up from its muddle-headed ignorance, it realized that the cats that had wandered with it in the temple square were long gone. And it did not know how many generations had passed, but it was still alive. Why was this, and what was life? This was the first question it thought about. A cat's eyes could adapt to the dark, and its body was much more flexible and agile than a human's. It had lived as long as a human's, so it began to wonder if it was a cat. If it was, what kind of cat was it? There was also a deeper question. What kind of cat did it want to be? Countless times in the quiet night when it looked up at the statue of the gods, the cat suddenly had an absurd idea in its heart. It wanted to be a cat, like that. From that day on, its eyes could not only see everything in the dark, but it could also clearly feel the blood in its body when it closed its eyes. It had spontaneously mastered the divine art of meditation. A cat's body did not look like a human at all, but in terms of origin, it was almost no different from a human. Schrödinger often strolled in the temple square, and saw all kinds of people coming and going. One of them was itself, not a specific person, but an image formed by countless people. This image was called Batet, and it was what the priests called it. When a cat meditated, there was a strange situation that human practitioners could not experience. It really turned into the image of a human, and had that kind of body, hair, and skin. This was a person that only existed in the world of consciousness, and in the real world, it was still a cat. This person was growing, and it was practicing. This psychic cat had never used any divine art in the temple, and its practice was just a kind of reflection. In fact, from the day it had self-awareness, it was already stronger than a lion, but no one dared to fight it. Batet gradually became a mascot in the temple. It was regarded as a magical cat by the priests because it lived long enough, and it had been in the temple for many years. It was a symbol of the gods' favor. The cat began its own practice, and it was very unique, different from everyone else in the temple. It could not have received formal education, and it did not have any prejudices in its heart. It just practiced whatever it thought of, and it did not have the concept of divine arts or physical arts. Inadvertently, it passed through many tests. Finally, one day, it decided to play a joke on a young priest, and suddenly used message magic. The young priest did not see a cat, but a woman called Batet. The second time the spiritual imprint was unfolded, and the time was much shorter than the last time. When Amon opened his eyes, he felt even more tired, because the content of the experience was too complex. At this time, Schrödinger was no longer an ignorant kitten. In many ways, this was the experience of a human, but much more complicated than that of an ordinary person. Aman experienced 10 years and one night. He was so tired that he could not even breathe. He sat there to recover for a long time before he said, "Schrödinger, you are very beautiful." Schrödinger's tone was a little embarrassed. "Are you talking about a cat or a person?" Aman smiled but did not answer. Schrödinger turned around and slipped out. This time, Aman rested for a full 5 days. He was in a trance, and he could not even tell whether he was a cat or a person. This kind of soul fusion was terrible. If he did not have a strong enough will, it would definitely cause a mental disorder. Aman was not yet 20 years old, but he had experienced hundreds of years as a cat. It was inevitable that he would be in a trance, but he could calm down again. He also completely understood how important the test he had just experienced was. Just like what Maria once asked him. "You were a passerby who almost fell to death by the Nile River, but later became a general who shocked the continent. May I ask, on the battlefield, are you still a passerby by the Nile River? When you returned with glory, you could not leave your territory because of your military power. In your territory, are you still a general on the battlefield? Now you are sitting in front of me with your head lowered. Are you still the innocent boy in Duk? If not, then who are you? If you are, then who is Aman?" Aman suddenly found that he was becoming stronger and stronger as he experienced Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. What he grew was not just pure strength, but also a kind of potential, or capacity of the soul. 5 days later, at midnight, Schrödinger once again opened his spiritual imprint. He looked up and saw the solemn and holy statue of the goddess Isis. It was the night when he used message magic to fool a young priest. When he walked past the main shrine, he suddenly felt a strange pressure. The eyes of the statue were staring at him. The cat had sensed it long ago, but today was different from the past. For some reason, the cat turned around and crouched down towards the statue, burying his furry head between his front paws as if he was praying. Then he heard a voice. "Batet, don't be afraid. I am Isis." Of course the cat knew who Isis was. He had lived in the shrine for hundreds of years, and today he heard the voice of Isis in his mind. His soul was shrouded in a deep sense of awe, and he replied in his heart, "Great goddess, are you calling me?" The voice of Isis was solemn and gentle. "You naughty kitten, I have seen what you have done. It is a rare blessing in the world for you to have achieved such an achievement. I have decided to give you a chance. Please make a vow and accept the guidance of the Ennead, and I will tell you what the path you have been pursuing is." Chapter 175. 159. Endless growth. Bastet did not have the slightest thought of refusing in front of Isis, and did not even have any doubt or hesitation. It made an oath and became a servant of the Ennead. The content of the oath was very complicated and difficult to express in words, and its meaning could only be clearly understood through the spiritual imprint. Batet would be introduced into a group of gods, or more precisely a belief system, because it was not yet a god. There was an agreement among the gods that they would teach the method of becoming a god to those who had hopes of becoming a god, including creatures like Batet. However, this had to be approved by the divine system, and only gods who had truly transcended eternal life had the right to do so. People like Batet who had mastered secrets were not allowed to reveal them to the outside world without permission. And this was one of the oaths. Joining a divine clan meant that one must be loyal to the clan and could not betray it, because its power came from this. This kind of oath was not an empty oath made by mortals, but was left in the spiritual imprint, and there was no way to go back on it. There may also be conflicts or even wars between the gods of the same divine clan, which seemed to contradict the oath of joining the divine clan. But that was another situation, and Batet could not understand it at that time. There was an agreement between the gods, and there was also an agreement between the god systems. For example, there was such an agreement between the Ennead and the Anunnaki divine clan that when the people of the mortal world had a conflict in the name of the gods could not directly intervene, and could only change it through various tests or in the form of agreements with mortals. This agreement seemed to limit what the gods could do, but it was also a way for everyone to coexist. And for a reason that people did not understand, The gods seemed to be willing to do so. Of course, the members of the divine clan could not all be true gods who had transcended eternal life, and the gods would send messengers to do many things, such as servants like Batet. Isis did not choose Batet for no reason, because this cat already had the foundation of cultivation. According to the myths and legends, this cat was already a mutated cat demon, and was about to transform into a human form. Naturally, it was an excellent assistant, and introducing it into the divine clan could also strengthen the power of the divine clan. This foundation wasn't given to it by Isis. It had been cultivated naturally, and Isis had guided it to the right path. In this experience, Amon also learned the secret of becoming a god. This was the answer that Crazy Owl and Bear had yearned for but could not get. As a cat, Batet did not pray to the gods, but was naturally led into the Ennead by Isis. However, this answer was no longer important to Amon. It was the origin power that he had comprehended. Back then, Crazy Owl discovered that the advancement of a warrior required various tests, and this was the most important breakthrough for him to solve the riddle. In fact, the secret that Isis had taught him was not about power itself, but the transcendence obtained through numerous trials. There were many people in the world who practiced body arts or divine arts. They may have achieved success, but the various trials they had experienced were unclear, and they may never reach the true realm of transcendence. Even if some people had achieved extremely high achievements, it was difficult for them to clearly summarize and experience it. After all, the path that everyone took was very different, and the common pattern was not so easy to find. People would inevitably pay the most attention to magical power, but often neglect the mystery of obtaining power. This was something that Amon had a deep understanding of, but after experiencing the past in Schrödinger's soul imprint, it was completely clear, because he had verified the cultivation of Batet in the past. Batet had made a vow that without the permission of the Ennead, she could not reveal the secret of becoming a god to others. This was the power that only the Lord God had. Isis's guidance of Batet, of course, was also nominally approved by the Lord God Horus, and it was impossible for Horus to disagree with Isis's decision. All those who received guidance must swear allegiance to this divine clan. And if there was an exception, Amon might be the only one. Amon learned all of Schrödinger's secrets from her soul imprint. It was difficult to say whether Schrödinger had violated the vow made by Batet in the past, but she did not reveal the secret of becoming a god to anyone. The answer that Crazy Owl and Bear were desperately seeking was in the heart of the cat beside them. Amon had gone through such a difficult path, and Schrödinger had accompanied him all the time, giving him a lot of help and guidance, but not directly telling him what the secret was. It was not until Amon had cultivated the power of two sides to the 8th level, and comprehended the origin of the power of the gods that Schrödinger opened the soul imprint to him. Amon already knew the real answer, and he did not receive guidance from any divine clan. One thing was very interesting. According to the agreement between the gods of the continent, Amon himself had actually played the role of a Lord God, because he had passed this power to his disciples John, Madanzo, and Link, and these disciples regarded him as the one and only God. Although Amon was not a real god who transcended eternal life, it was also the prototype of a new divine clan. Schrödinger did this because she had no other choice. If she could not unlock the seal of imprisonment, she would never be free. Why did the Batet of the past fall into the Schrödinger of today? There was no answer from this experience. Amon unfolded Schrödinger's soul imprint for the 3rd time. The time in meditation was very short, and it was the process of Batet receiving guidance from Isis. When he opened his eyes and looked into the cat's eyes in the glimmer of dawn, what he felt was not the exhaustion of the soul, but the confusion and the sudden realization after being freed from the confusion. Schrödinger asked, "Amon, what have you experienced tonight?" Amon replied, "You accepted the guidance of the goddess Isis, joined the Ennead and made a vow." Schrödinger sighed. "This is the beginning of everything, and it may also be the source of my imprisonment today." Amon narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you trying to say that the vow back then is your imprisonment today?" Schrödinger sighed again. "Maybe it's not the vow itself, but my desire to get rid of this vow." Is it a violation of the vow back then when I unfolded my soul imprint to you? Amon shook his head and said, maybe it is, maybe it is not. I can't answer yet. I need to continue to witness. I used to think that you knew so many things but always refused to tell me, but today I understand that it is really not easy to listen to this long story. While Moses and the others embarked on a difficult journey, Amon was also moving forward in another experience. This road was a river of time. After receiving guidance from Isis, Batet realized how lucky she was. She was already very powerful, but she had not found a clear path, and it was Isis who let her confirm from the beginning to avoid going astray. When unfolding Bastet's soul imprint, Amon's mind was calm and unmoved, but when he carefully reflected on it afterwards, he could not help but be secretly shocked, comparing it with his own cultivation experience. He had explored step by step to achieve what he had today, and before he set foot on this path, all kinds of encounters were unimaginable. If it was a mortal who knew nothing, even if the gods told him all the secrets, his first reaction would be, how is this possible? It was indeed too difficult, so difficult that he could not even bear to look back. From the beginning, Amon did not want to do it, but the circumstances pushed him to take such a path. Now that he recalled his own experience, in fact, if he had to do it all over again, he would not have any other choice. Amon himself was a general on the battlefield, but he had experienced many thrilling and unimaginable battles in Schrödinger's soul imprint. Not only were there conflicts between divine systems, but the enemies also included monsters and various demons in the divine realm. In addition to the places where people lived, there were all kinds of monsters in the vast wilderness, which Amon had encountered. So where did the demons come from? In fact, these so-called demons had the same origin as Batet and even Amon. Why was Batet considered lucky? On one hand, she had gained wisdom and obtained mystical powers. On the other hand, she did not lose her mind or fall, and received the guidance of Isis at the crucial moment. The so-called correct path might not be limited to just one, but ultimately all should lead to the realm of transcendence and eternal life. But the wrong path was hard to say. There were all sorts of strange things, and perhaps even the gods did not know where it led to. For example, the mutated Ironback King Elmar. If it had been killed by Medanzo and Link back then, it would not be where it is today, and if Amon did not pass by, and it killed Medanzo and Link, no one knew what would have happened afterwards. Divine arts and body arts circulated in the world, especially divine arts which were so mystical. There were laws in the world that only hereditary nobles with the permission of the divine temples could learn divine arts and divine texts. But there would always be deviations when it was carried out by humans. Over thousands of years, there would inevitably be secret arts being passed down. Although it was by chance, it was inevitable after a long time, just like Bastet's situation. These people and creatures could become irritable and cruel. For example, if John had not met Amon, it would have been difficult for him to control his restless power. More dangerous than impulsive and irritable on the surface was their ruthlessness and cold-bloodedness. Some people would even use all kinds of evil methods to cultivate their power, and if it was not stopped, it would become a disaster. As a servant of the gods, Batet was often sent to fight against these demons. Sometimes the powerful demons in the wilderness would be directly beheaded by her, and sometimes she would secretly help the warriors of the human world. Batet made outstanding contributions to the messengers sent by the Ennead, and she advanced bravely all the way until one day she lost her power, and was recalled to the temple of Isis. Amon had experienced this kind of test before, and at this time he saw the importance of the divine system. She needed guidance and protection. When she finally passed the test, Osiris appeared. Osiris directly walked out of his own statue, like a shadow in the night suddenly becoming alive. Batet hurriedly transformed into a human figure and prostrated herself, saying, "Great Osiris, you have appeared before me. Do you have any instructions?" Osiris's voice seemed to come from the abyss. "Batet, I have seen your performance. You are the most outstanding of all the divine emissaries. I will give you the latest guidance." From that day on, Batet became an emissary of the underworld and carried out more dangerous tasks. And as a reward, Osiris taught her a strange magic that could restrain living souls. The so-called living soul could barely be described as the soul of a living creature. When a life is destroyed, everything is over, but what one has done in a lifetime will still leave a mark, whether the person is willing or not. The influence of these marks will still exist. For example, when a person dies, people in the world will still think of him, and the places he passed and the things he used will still leave traces of him. And this information will become another kind of consciousness. Sometimes people will say that they see ghosts, but it is just the opposite of these marks. But if this information can be condensed into a kind of consciousness, that is the living soul. Amon saw the souls of his father and Mayor Dusty in the underworld of Anunnaki, and the situation was similar. Amon once suspected that the queen of the underworld, Kella, performed a kind of magic that people did not understand. And now he himself had learned this magic from the experience of Schrödinger, and it was recorded in the Book of the Dead, which Osiris taught to Batet, and it was called the magic of the dead. It could not only receive the souls of the dead, but it could also restrain the souls of the beheaded. The dead would disperse, just as the traces left by people would gradually disappear sooner or later, but those souls with strong wishes or deep resentment could be received or restrained and led into the underworld of the Ennead. Bastet's main task was to behead those powerful demons, restrain their souls, and let Osiris collect them in the Book of the Dead. Amon unfolded Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. After this experience, it was already 2 months after Moses's departure, and he now had the same achievement of the 8th level of the power of origin as Batet, and when he looked back on this experience, he naturally also mastered the magic of the dead. From this he also understood one thing, and that was that such spiritual imprints were probably the so-called true language in the poem. But so far he still did not understand how Kella built the underworld, and for what purpose. If he continued, Bastet's realm back then would have surpassed the current Amon. Schrödinger specifically reminded him, "Amon, you are not a complete experience, but a non-existent bystander. You have not yet reached the realm, and you cannot really break through in the experience. But doing this is also good for you, and it will help you when you break through the same realm in the future. Understand first, then verify." Amon soon realized why Schrödinger said this, because Batet had experienced the test of breaking through to the 9th level. She had been practicing in seclusion under the protection of Osiris, meditating for a whole half a year, and her soul seemed to have entered an endless river. This was the most difficult experience Amon had ever had since he unfolded Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. It was different from the past because he could not stop at any time, and had to complete this test in order to get out of the meditation. Fortunately, the power of Amon's soul was much stronger than it was a few months ago, and he could barely complete it in one go. Entering the meditation of Batet in the past was like a dream within a dream, and he had to wait for Batet to wake up before the current Amon could wake up. This experience could be described in 4 words: endless. It was no longer the experience of a cat, but the life course of all kinds of creatures, and the complex information was more than anyone's soul could bear. A person's life was limited, and so was their knowledge, but at this moment, all kinds of knowledge of different identities poured into the soul. Bastet's soul was almost drowned and lost in this river, unable to find the end, but in the end, she crossed it safely. She had experienced it all and forgotten it all, and the only way to reach the other side was to remain unmoved and not separate. Amon also did not move, and he was able to experience so many years as a cat without being in a trance, and his soul was clear and unhindered. After going through the test of endless growth, Schrödinger's power immediately became stronger and more magical. She really became a person, and did not use message magic or shape-shifting magic. At this time, Osiris told her that she was the most powerful of all the divine servants of the Ennead, second only to those gods who had truly transcended eternal life. When Amon opened his eyes in the meditative state this time, his whole body seemed to be imprisoned, and all his power was almost emptied, and it was a full day before he could speak. Schrödinger kept looking at him, and even rubbed her furry little head against him from time to time. When Amon finally spoke, he was the first to say, "I heard Osiris speak, but I never saw his face clearly." Schrödinger gently stroked the back of his hand with the small pat of her paw and said, "You do not really have that realm, You only experienced it in my spiritual imprint, so you can't see Osiris' face clearly, and you don't understand what kind of existence he is. I will not voluntarily reveal the secrets of the Ennead, and you can learn as much as you can from my experience. Osiris said that you are the most powerful of the divine servants, but Enkidu and I have fought before. Back then, you were no match for Enkidu. In terms of pure strength, you can't even defeat me now. Amon took a deep breath and moved his body with difficulty before saying, Osiris said that you are the most powerful of the divine servants. Schrödinger shook his head and said, how many strong beings like Enkidu are there in the world? He even injured Horus. Your strength is already very strong, even no less than mine at that time. But you still don't know the true magic of this realm. There are many people who have achieved the 9th level in the world who have not experienced the test of endless growth, and they will not understand it until the last moment. Amon did not quickly realize what magic Schrödinger was talking about, because this time he had to rest for a full month before he could continue. The next experience in the spiritual imprint contained too many unknowns for Amon. The 9th level supreme warriors or supreme mages of the human world may be able to fight with him in terms of strength, but there were many realms that he had not experienced. The transcendence of the gods did not depend solely on great strength. Schrödinger learned necromancy and passed the test of endless growth. And of course he also had the special ability that Amon obtained from the underworld. Only then did Amon understand that it was just sensing people's thoughts. As long as one had achieved the 7th level, if they were prepared, even the gods could not catch them, and his special ability was not always effective. Amon was also relieved at the same time, which also meant that even the gods could not sense his thoughts. Chapter 176. The cat goddess Bastet. Bastet now had the title cat goddess. Although she was not yet a true god who transcended eternal life, she was already qualified to enjoy sacrifices in the shrine. The gods sent down an oracle, and the priests of the shrine built a statue for Bastet next to the statue of Osiris, which was the image that Azung saw. He had also built a similar statue in the manor. At this time, the magic of a higher realm could be seen. Bastet had cultivated another independent consciousness, which was one with her origin, and could attach to the statue. The statue itself naturally had no magic power, but it had a strange source of power, which was the sacrifices and prayers of people, the requests and wishes, and the casting of countless thoughts and beliefs. Intelligence has power, and thinking also requires energy. It can't see, but without this power, people can't do anything. For example, to drink a glass of water, the first thing to do was to have the thought of drinking water, and the body knew to pick up the cup. This was not the power that people usually understood. All that could be seen was the hand picking up the cup, and as for the origin behind it, it was another form. The incarnation that the statue attached to was a part of Bastet, which was also related to Bastet's realm. The higher her realm was, the more statues she could attach to. On the other hand, the wider the source of this power she obtained, the stronger her soul would be. In a sense, the scope of her divine realm would be wider. Is this the so-called divine power source domain? Bastet never had her own independent divine realm. She only enjoyed sacrifices as a follower of Osiris in the shrines of various places. In Schrödinger's spiritual imprint, Azung had a preliminary understanding of the meaning of the divine realm. He had once sensed the thoughts of countless people in the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan. At that time, Azung could only keep his consciousness clear and undisturbed. Now he could finally confirm that those were the prayers of countless people in the divine realm to the queen of the underworld, including the thoughts of the souls in the underworld. The underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan was an independent divine realm belonging to Kella. There, she could have the power of those souls. No wonder Azung released the souls of the Dushians, which made the queen of Kella furious. Judging from the undead magic that Azung had mastered, the queen of Kella had used this magic to restrain the souls and build the underworld. What was so magical about this power? It could repair the soul. Can the soul be hurt? Ordinary people might not understand, but at As level, it was very clear. Ashun had been through hundreds of battles, but there was not a single scar on his body, but he had been injured. The most serious time was when he crossed the Euphrates River and encountered a monster. He used a scroll to kill the monster, and then hurried on with his journey. He accidentally used up all his energy and almost couldn't move. It took him half a month to recover in Abel and Cain's manner. Without life force, a person would be nothing more than a block of cold blood. Without a soul, a person would be nothing more than a walking corpse. All injuries hurt one's life force and soul. Some could be seen, while some could only be felt. The simplest example was that when a person was extremely fatigued and his consciousness was hazy, he would not be able to exert his strength no matter how strong his body was. As a follower of the god of the underworld, Batet slew powerful demons and bound their souls. His own soul would also be injured in battle, but the incarnations attached to the statues of the gods could continuously absorb power to repair his soul. When she reached the 9th level and passed the true test, she would truly have the miracle of endless life. As long as she was not destroyed, her life seemed to be endless. When I experienced this part of the past in Bastet's spiritual imprint, he opened his eyes again and let out a long sigh. He felt much more relaxed at this moment than when he had left the state of meditation the last time. Schrödinger was still looking at him in the morning light. I reached out his hand and touched the cat's shoulder. The test of endless life is so important. It allows you to have a divine realm, and your life is almost endless. Is this immortality? What about the real gods? There was a trace of sadness in Schrödinger's eyes. Back then, I thought I could stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods. I had great power and endless life. Standing on the altar, I heard countless people calling for the great goddess Batet in their hearts. I suddenly thought of myself as a god. But later I found out that I wasn't. There is a price to pay for everything. You will understand once you continue to experience it. Schrödinger was never willing to talk about his past. After I guessed her origin, he did not allow her to say the name Batet. After experiencing her soul imprint for 200 years, I already knew Schrödinger very well. She did not even need to use her special ability to understand Schrödinger's feelings. So she changed the topic and said, "You have passed the test of the endless cycle, and have been allowed by the divine system to enjoy the right to accept the sacrifice in the divine temple. You can attach your incarnation to the statue. But from the divine arts you have learned, you don't actually need to reach this level to do something similar." Schrödinger nodded. "Your understanding is truly astonishing. No wonder you could explore this path, without the guidance of the gods. Yes, a soul can attach itself to a statue of the gods and absorb its power. There is no need for the power to reach the 9th level. But there are 2 limitations. First, it can only attach itself to a specific statue, and cannot change its incarnation at will. As for those living souls that aren't strong enough, they often need external help to achieve this." I asked again, "Have you encountered such a situation before?" Schrödinger replied, "Of course I have. I have restrained some demons that attach themselves to the statues of the gods in remote temples. Compared to the living demons, the powerful souls that occasionally condense after a demon's death prefer to do it this way." I smiled bitterly. "Back then, you have also killed mages like me." Schrödinger also smiled bitterly. "Not mages like you, but supreme mages who are enemies of the shrines. Ordinary mages do not need the emissaries of the gods to act, and as long as the supreme mages do not become enemies of the shrines will not be willing to provoke them. The gods often send emissaries when they hear the prayers and summons of the shrines. There are 2 kinds of mages that I have killed. One is those who have gone astray and become a scourge to the people of the gods. The other is those who have openly become enemies of the gods and committed unforgivable crimes." I thought for a moment and said, "The latter situation like Bear?" Schrödinger lowered his head and said, "Yes, if I was still the so-called goddess, I might have been sent to assist the pursuers of the shrines. But I was taken away by Bear. The Empire of Igut paid a heavy price to hunt down Bear. He died together with 3 supreme mages and 4 supreme warriors. If I were to accept such a task, it would usually be to guide those people on how to catch up with Bear and resist his power at the critical moment. In terms of pure combat power, the cat goddess Batet surpassed many powerful opponents that I had seen. but she was still not as good as Enkidu. If Batet and Enkidu fought one-on-one, it would be difficult for her to win, but she should be able to escape. If she was alone and encountered Enkidu and Gilgamesh, and Enkidu fought head-on while Gilgamesh used a soul-binding method to lock onto her, Batet could also be beheaded. This was how Humbaba died. When the gods of the divine clans dealt with powerful demons on earth, they usually sent down an oracle to let the shrines send masters to destroy them. And sometimes they would send emissaries to secretly assist. The shrines would also take the initiative to kill the so-called demons. Sometimes the opponent was too strong, they would pray to the gods, and when the gods heard the news, they would also send emissaries if necessary. Batet was once the most powerful of all the emissaries of the Ennead. Schrödinger didn't seem to want to talk about this topic anymore. He stood up and said to Ah, "You will soon learn what the judgment of fate and judgment of the end is in my spiritual imprint. My experience is a confirmation and help to your training, but it's not clear whether it's good or bad. The weather is good today. Would you like to take a walk with me by the Nile River?" I also stood up and said, "It's been a few months, it's rare that you're in the mood to relax. Let's go for a walk by the Nile River, and catch some fish for you." Schrödinger tilted his head and looked at Ah. "It's not that I'm in the mood, it's that you've experienced so much in my spiritual imprint, and you're still in the mood to catch fish for me. That's what's really rare." The Supreme General of the Empire had been living in seclusion for several months, and the farmers in the territory finally saw Ah coming out for a walk. He walked with his hands behind his back, walking out of the village built by Moses and the other slaves, passing through grassy slopes, fields and river stalls. He didn't bring any servants with him, only a strolling cat. The wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The clouds on the horizon were like a flock of white lambs, and the Nile River flowed endlessly. Ah stood on a small boat with Schrödinger squatting at the bow. Without oars or sails, the boat gently floated out. It didn't drift with the current, but headed straight for the heart of the river. A group of huge crocodiles on the steep slope by the shore were startled. They swam into the river, showing their scaly backs beside the boat, and then disappeared into the deep water. Ah stopped the boat in the middle of the river, feeling the water flowing under his feet. With a wave of his hand, a few fish appeared out of thin air. Flames rose in the air, and all kinds of magic were used to clean the scales and internal organs of the fish. The seasoning was also sprinkled out of thin air, and in the blink of an eye, the fish were roasted fragrant. Then he took out a golden plate and placed the fish in front of Schrödinger. Schrödinger sighed and said, "Ah, your cooking skills are getting better and better. This fish is so good." Ah smiled and said, "It's just the effort because you like it." Schrödinger looked up at the sky with his cat eyes and said, "People often forget that the sky is so blue that it makes people's hearts beat." Ah also looked up at the sky and said, "You were very sad just now. Are you in a good mood now?" Schrödinger smiled and said, "It's been 100 years and I've never been as sad as I am today, nor as happy as I am today." Seeing that Schrödinger was happy, I was also very happy. He wanted to continue to unfold Schrödinger's spiritual imprint that night. After 200 years, it was the most critical moment, but Schrödinger advised him to rest for a few more days, and he must be at the peak of his condition to experience the next part. Ah rested for 3 days, and at the same time he practiced the power of the 8th level. All the skills he had learned before could be instantly used as one. He suddenly felt that after experiencing Schrödinger's past, he had also mastered all the skills before Schrödinger broke through the 9th level, except for transforming into a cat. After all, he was not Schrödinger. He felt that his condition was at an unprecedented peak, but Schrödinger advised him to practice for 2 more days, so he waited until the night after 5 days to start again. Batet transformed from a cat to a human, and from a human, she was revered as a god. She had endless life and could continuously absorb the power to repair the soul, and in her consciousness, she had already regarded herself as a god. She had also seen those gods who had truly transcended eternal life, and their means in the human world were no more than this. The only difference was the strength of their power. During this experience, I had a new understanding of the divine realm, and along with Bastet's spiritual imprint, he entered the residence of the Ennead. This was a wonderful world, above the fourth waterfall in the upper reaches of the Nile River. Most people who walked here could only see the waterfall and the mountains, and could not find anything unusual at all. But after opening a strange spatial door, there was another world hidden here, a world created by the gods in the human world. There were towering palaces and strange plants from all over the continent, and the messengers of the gods gathered here to practice. This wonderful world could protect them from outside interference, and the environment was more suitable for practicing all kinds of power. Batet had an independent small palace. It was called the Eru, first built by Ra, and later built by Isis and Seth. Every brick, every stone, every blade of grass and every tree was the most beautiful in the world, and the use of brilliant magic formations to gather the ubiquitous power between heaven and earth, creating a magical spatial world. But the real gods rarely appeared here. Only Horus lived in the Eru all year round, and the messengers of the gods obeyed his orders. I also went to the underworld of the Ennead through Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. In the myths and legends, Osiris lived at the end of the Nile River, which also symbolized the end of people's lives, and the underworld was indeed on a beach at the mouth of the Nile River, which was flooded for half a year. The underworld was also invisible to ordinary people. It was like another strange spatial world, very similar to the underworld of the Anunnaki, but also slightly different. Anah's experience was not very clear. The god Schrödinger had seen the most was of course Osiris, but in her spiritual imprint, she had never clearly seen the face of this god. He was like a shadow that was faintly discernible. Many years passed like this, and Schrödinger, who thought of herself as a god, gradually had new difficulties, and the seemingly endless life became a little boring. Year after year, like a monotonous river flowing through the same section, the people of the world were constantly changing, but life was always familiar. Is that what I am? She thought to herself, a god? From a cat to a goddess. Was this what she was after? I have witnessed too much, but why should I witness it? Just when her unwavering faith for 300 years was in trouble, the real test came. At that time, Batet was in the underworld, and a strange power ignored the barrier of the underworld and directly pulled her out, revealing her on a desolate beach. Schrödinger thought that she had encountered a powerful enemy, probably an attack from a foreign god. The underworld was built by a magical space, so who could directly pull her out of the underworld? The enemy was unimaginably powerful. She looked up and saw a gray vortex in the sky, as if it was tearing the world apart and leading to an endless unknown abyss. She donned her battle armor and picked up her weapon, only to be struck by a bolt of black lightning. Not only did the lightning strike her weapon, it also struck her soul. It was as though the sun had suddenly lit up in the darkness. She finally understood what she was facing. Just like Azung had witnessed the encounter of Enkidu, Batet had also experienced the battle of the invisible opponent. All the attacks seemed familiar, hidden in the black lightning, and contained all the injuries suffered by the enemies she had killed in her life. She had no way to avoid it. She could only face it, just like the test of fate. According to the understanding of ordinary people, defeating a person did not only depend on strength, but also on the timing and position of the attack. For example, a heavy blow might not be able to injure a Hercules, but a light stab at a vital point would be able to take the opponent's life. These were all techniques in combat. But the test of fate did not include such techniques, it was just the power to inflict damage. With Bastet's achievements at that time, she could already change her body, so there were no vital points to speak of. But the power of the black lightning was not limited to just that, it also attacked her soul. All the resentment of the world towards Batet erupted. Bas finally understood one thing. The gratitude she received from the altar, and the kindness of her prayers could counteract this resentment. Otherwise, the first strike of the black lightning would have shattered her soul. This was like the judgment of the end of the world. There was no enemy, it was the reflection of all her actions. Batet finally felt truly weak, she was far from being as strong as she thought. The valiant demon body that had cultivated for 300 years was destroyed. The incarnations that had attached themselves to the shrines had all disappeared. Her life was over, her soul was severely injured, and she had lost all her strength, but it was not destroyed. When the black vortex disappeared, her final realization was that she was different from the souls that she had been bound to. She could attach herself to a blank life, combining her soul and life force. This was a choice made in a single thought. She wished that she was still a cat. 300 years of cultivation, all the achievements she had, in the end, all she got was a chance to make a choice. At this moment, her soul was suddenly intercepted by a mysterious power, as if time had stopped for an eternity. This was necromancy divine art. And it was a necromancy divine art that could only be performed by real gods. The one who acted was Osiris, the god of the underworld. It was as if his soul had fused with hers, giving Batet 3 choices. Chapter 177. 100 Years of Solitude. The first option was to stay. At that time, Batet was in a pure soul state, sober as never before, but she could not stay in the world on her own. The all-powerful Osiris could use the necromancy magic that only gods could master to keep her in the underworld, and use the power of the underworld to repair her soul. Once again, she could attach herself to the statues everywhere. Perhaps she could reform her body, and one day become a true god who transcends eternal life. This seemed to be the best choice. She was still the goddess Batet, the underworld, and had the hope of transcending eternal life. The second option was to forget. The imprint of the soul was the soul itself, and it could not be forgotten just because she said so. Osiris asked Batet to unfold the imprint to him, just as Schrödinger did to today, saying the name and the real language. But Osiris did not do it just for the experience. He had the means to integrate these imprints into his soul, so Batet would no longer exist. This seemed to be the worst choice, which meant the end of everything. 300 years of cultivation would eventually disappear, and the imprint would be left to Osiris. The third option was to refuse, because the first 2 options required Bastet's own consent, otherwise Osiris would not be able to stop her. Batet could pretend that Osiris had never appeared at this moment, and still combine her soul with her new life, becoming a cat according to her wishes. This was the only thing she could do in the end after 300 years of cultivation. These 3 options sounded complicated, but there was no concept of time. It was just a moment when the soul became sober. Once Batet made a decision, everything was over. I finally understood what the test of fate, the judgment of the end of days was. After leaving this part of Schrödinger's imprint, he did not open his eyes. Instead, he sat for a whole day before he barely recovered. Although he was not the one who experienced the final test, he was also there. Ah's soul was injured, and it was not something that could be repaired in a day or 2. The place where he was in was the village built by Moses and the others, like a shaped duck town, with a shrine in the center of 2 neat rows of stone houses, and a square in front of the shrine. When Ah opened Schrödinger's soul imprint, he was sitting in front of the altar in the temple. This temple was built by Moses and others for their god, Allah. Moses had never seen Allah's face, and Allah was the only god. So Moses was not allowed to build a statue like other temples, so there was only one symbol on the altar, the cross of light. The cross was divided into 4 parts, top, bottom, left, and right. The top, left, and right sides were equal in length, while the bottom side was twice the length of the other 3 sides. At the center of the cross, there was a sun-shaped ring emitting light. At the top, left, and right of the cross there were 3 rings emitting light, looking like 3 crosses. This image was widely spread across the continent. It symbolized light, the light that illuminated the world and awakened all things. On many occasions it also symbolized the sun, the source of life. Apart from the light and sun, the cross itself was a mysterious totem that had been popular in the continent since ancient times. In Babylon and the Hittite kingdom, the cross was an instrument of torture, hung on it for public display. Therefore, the cross-shaped totem also symbolized suffering, and the desire to be redeemed from suffering. In the Igut, people used cross-shaped stakes on the riverbank, representing the height of the flood. This totem was later regarded as a symbol of life and reproduction. Moses erected a cross of light in the temple, symbolizing his faith in Allah. The meaning was very complicated. Schrödinger stood guard in front of Ah, from sunrise to sunset, and then to sunrise again. Finally, opened his eyes. Schrödinger asked with concern. Are you all right? Are your injuries serious? Reached out and hugged the cat, gently stroking it in his arms. I'm fine, I just lost my strength. I'm afraid it will take a while for me to recover. Once again lost his strength. This time, it was different from the last test. He felt like he was imprisoned. He was injured in Schrödinger's spiritual imprint, and needed some time to recuperate. But his body was normal, and he was still a strong young man in his 20s. Stood up with Schrödinger in his arms, and glanced at the cross on the altar, which symbolized the faith of the Dushuns in him. However, Moses and his clansmen were on a difficult journey. He sighed and walked out with Schrödinger in his arms. He held the cat in the crook of his arm like he was holding a baby. As he walked, he said, "The weather is good, and the air is good. Let's go for a walk in the mountains and hunt some game. I can't use magic for now, so I won't catch fish in the river today." For the next month, the servants in the territory saw the Supreme General resume his leisurely and comfortable life. He did not ride a horse, nor did he bring any attendants with him. Every day he would take good wine and food with him, and wander around with a cat, looking at the various sceneries of the world. The places they visited the most were the banks of the Nile River, and the wilderness near Mount Horeb. No one could hear the intimate conversation between and the cat. Asked Schrödinger. It's normal for you to refuse the second option, but why didn't you agree to the first option as well? Schrödinger replied calmly. Only when I reached the end of the road did I understand what the judgment of fate is. The gods guided me to that path, and my actions on that path will eventually lead to my own end. Do I still want to be Baudet again? Besides, being a lonely soul in the underworld has actually become the source of Osiris' power. In a sense, Baudet has always been a tool of the gods. She has slain too many powerful demons, so much so that when the final test came, even her powerful demon body that had been practicing for 300 years could not bear it. Those were all tasks that she had accepted from the gods to complete. On the other hand, the gods also allowed her to enjoy the sacrifices in the temple. The prayers and faith of countless people offset most of the impact of the resentment of the judgment of the end, so that she could retain her soul. I asked again. When you came back to your senses, you were no longer willing to become a tool of Osiris and the Ennead. Did you ever resent them? Schrödinger shook his head and said, No, I don't resent them. I'm just a cat who was lucky enough to gain wisdom. Without the guidance of Isis, I don't know what kind of fate I would have. It's too difficult to find the right path among the thousands of wrong paths, and it's more likely that I would end up like those demons I killed. I was taken into the Ennead, gained great power, and became a goddess on the altar. With 300 years, I'm already a lucky cat, and I shouldn't complain about anything. What I did was what I was willing to do, and I've borne the consequences, that's all. The gods told you everything, but did not tell you about the final test. Do you know why? Schrödinger. When I finally understood, I did not resent Osiris. He never told me. Of course there was a reason. If I had known what the final end of this path was a long time ago, I was likely to shrink back, and I would not have been able to pass all the previous tests, and I would not have been able to reach that step at all. Although the test was terrible, one must also be qualified to face it, and the arrival of the test is a symbol of achievement. But I also did not resent Osiris. If I had guessed from the heart, I would not have achieved that kind of achievement, and I would have been of no use to him. The gods need powerful and courageous emissaries to complete all kinds of difficult and dangerous tasks. No god will tell this secret to the recipient in advance, and will only make all kinds of arrangements and agreements. I suddenly thought of something, looked down at Schrödinger and said, Zeni once reminded me of 3 things. It seems to be related to the final test. Did you tell Bear? Schrödinger looked down at the soil at his feet. I was the one who reminded Bear, but it may not be all good intentions. I once said that knowing this secret is not good or bad for you. What will you do? I smiled. Nothing much. There's no difference between knowing and not knowing. In fact, I have also reminded my disciple, but some things are like fate, and you have to face it. A group of ants crawled past Schrödinger's feet, and the cat seemed to be talking to himself. It's easy to say, but it's also the hope of reaching the end of human achievement. Can you really do it? I sighed softly. I don't know, but since I said so, let's verify it. A month later, I once again opened Schrodinger's spiritual imprint. This was the last time. It felt like reincarnation, and Schrödinger became a newborn cat again. It finally opened its light blue and pink eyelids, looking at the strange and unknown world. At this moment, the cat was still at a loss, and could not even struggle to stand, and did not know who it was, but its eyes were extraordinarily clear. As it slowly grew up, it gradually showed a different kind of magic. It could recognize many things around it, although it had never seen them before. It naturally knew what they were and what they were used for, which made it instinctively avoid a lot of harm. The survival rate of kittens in the wild was very low, and at least half of the kittens born in the year would freeze to death in the first cold wave of winter. This was the law of nature. The few lucky ones that survived had to face predation from wild beasts, the difficulty of finding food, and all kinds of unpredictable injuries. Schrödinger knew how to make its own nest from the time it was a toddler. It brought all kinds of things that could keep it warm, and looked for a safe place to shelter from the rain. After the first winter, it felt more and more familiar with many things in the world. Finally, one day, it followed a cat from a secluded street corner to the square in front of the Temple of Isis, and suddenly realized that it had been to this place before. This was Bastet's achievement. She could bring her memories back to life, but at the beginning, this memory was very vague, and needed to be awakened bit by bit. The reason was very simple. The body and mind were one, and the soul was limited by life. A kitten's brain did not have the ability to think or recall so much complex information. It could only understand what it could understand at that time. In fact, Bastet did not die, but continued in such a situation, and had another chance to start over. But this did not mean that it could restore its past achievements. Cats were weak, and a big dog could kill it before it had time to cultivate its strength. A stray cat that could grow to 2 years old was already considered lucky among its kind. Its memories gradually became clearer as it grew up, and it found its way back from the shadow of déjà vu. It once again opened its spiritual wisdom, and if it was lucky enough, it might eventually embark on the path to the gods again. But if it lost the protection and support of the divine clan, the difficulty would be unimaginable. Shortly after it opened its spiritual wisdom, Osiris appeared again. One day, it was dozing off under the wall outside the temple, and the surrounding cats suddenly woke up and fled. Schrödinger opened its eyes and looked up to see a god in the shadow, and suddenly recognized it. Osiris said, "Bastet, welcome back." It was Osiris who awakened its soul in advance, and used magic to tell it all its past experiences. When it was finally able to cultivate again, Osiris found it again and asked, "Bastet, you did not die, but you were reborn in another way. I have been looking forward to your recovery, and your experiences have allowed you to start over again. Compared to the countless strong people in history who have fallen in the test, you are so lucky. As long as you unfold your spiritual imprint to me, you will still be a member of the Ennead." However, Schrödinger replied, "Great God of the underworld, I want to make a new choice, and I don't want to have anything to do with the Ennead anymore." Osiris said, "This is not a choice you can make. The guidance of the Ennead has made you a magical cat, and you cannot violate the oath you made back then. If you give up your mission, it is tantamount to giving up your own power and path." At first, Schrödinger did not quite understand what Osiris meant by this, but later, Schrödinger began to cultivate, and it took many years to break through the many tests, but its power never recovered. But this did not prevent Schrödinger from continuing to cultivate. The realm it was trying to verify was not hindered. It just did not need to use that power, and it passed the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle. It became a cat with its soul imprisoned, and it had always been a cat. Did Osiris imprison its power? So that it would always have the body of a cat. This kind of imprisonment had been loosened once, and Schrödinger was a cat with the 9th level of the power of origin, and it could occasionally gather its power to do something, but it was very taxing on its body. Later, Baal came to the Temple of Isis and found a cat peeping at the ancient books in the archives, And Schrödinger also tried to find a way to lift the imprisonment of its soul from various records. Bale was surprised to find that the cat could not be detected by detection magic, which was almost a stealth skill that only gods had, so he conveniently stole the cat, wanting to know its secret. But Schrödinger only gave Bale 3 reminders. The genius Bale guessed that Schrödinger might be a sealed god, and once said, "If I can find a way to unlock your seal, you will tell me your secret." The sealing magic in the human world is nothing more than the transformation of brilliant message magic, and I am the most brilliant message magic master today. I already knew what happened next. Bale fled to the deep mountains of the Euphrates Valley, and at the last moment, he used the magic bone to throw Schrödinger from the air. Schrödinger landed safely, but when the bone was put away, it fell into a pool of water. Schrödinger went to the town of Duke with Bale's last message to find Crazy Ole, and waited until I showed up. From beginning to end, a long experience of 400 years, I returned as a bystander to the town of Duke where he grew up. He saw himself as a baby, and also saw his mother who had died when he was a child. In the spiritual imprint, I experienced everything as Schrödinger, but he saw himself in this memory, which was an indescribable feeling. He finally moved, and as soon as the thought occurred, it could no longer stay in the spiritual imprint of Schrödinger. Everything was over. When he opened his eyes, it was not yet dawn. In the darkness, the cat's eyes shone like jewels. Schrödinger looked at him expectantly, but asked in a worried tone, "What's wrong with you? You didn't finish the experience?" I said in a low voice, "Yes, how did you know? When I unfolded the spiritual imprint, weren't you in a state of ignorance?" Schrödinger jumped on his back, buried his head in his arms and said, "Because your eyes are full of tears." I reached out and hugged Schrödinger in front of his chest. "I'm so sorry. I was moved because I saw my mother. It was the first time I saw her face clearly. I was too young when she passed away. Thank you so much." Schrödinger's voice was somewhat distant, murmuring in front of awe. "Why are you saying sorry? The one who should be saying thank you is me. It's already a miracle that you could go through it until now. Even during the Judgment Day, you didn't have any thoughts. You didn't hesitate to endure 400 years of loneliness, just to help me. It's normal that you didn't persist to the end, because the final imprint was mostly a bystander looking at your own experience. You experienced the endless cycle of life and death in my spiritual imprint, but it was not your own test. You still don't have that kind of realm. Only when you break through to the 9th level in the future will you be able to verify it." I held Schrödinger in his arms and said softly, "You have something to ask me, why don't you speak?" Schrödinger buried his head in the crook of his arm. "You know my experience for the past 400 years better than I do. Did you find the seal that imprisoned my soul?" I said apologetically, "I might have found some traces, but it's not very clear. Can you give me a few more days? I'm going to meditate in seclusion. I can't see anyone for the time being, including you." Schrödinger raised his head. "I understand. You want to verify it in your cultivation. Thank you for your painstaking efforts. I'll wait for you." The Supreme General closed his door and ordered that no one should disturb him. He meditated in silence, experiencing and reflecting on everything. Half a month had passed while the Nile River flowed. Ah, who did not speak or move, had been meditating in solitude for 100 years. He ordered his servants not to disturb him, but a messenger came from the distant Hittite kingdom. I had no choice but to come out of his room to personally receive the messenger. Chapter 178. A plan to escape. When I captured King Lucier of Hittite alive, he let a cat sit on the throne in the middle and enjoy roasted wine while the king watched from the side. This scene enraged the court supreme mage Celia. I had successfully ambushed and captured the king right under her nose, which was a great humiliation to her. And this was even more intolerable. Celia challenged I to a duel, which I agreed to. Later, at the banquet for peace talks between the two countries, the matter was brought up again, and the pharaohs of Igut and King Hittite even said that they wanted to witness the duel. Although a duel was only an act between people, The duel between Celia and Ah was equivalent to an agreement between the two monarchs. Unfortunately, King Lucier and Lazith II Pharaoh had died one after another, and even the successor of Pharaoh Merneptah could not object to Ah participating in this duel that was known to the world. Therefore, this was the best opportunity for Ah to leave Igut. In fact, this duel should have been held long ago, but there were many unexpected factors that delayed it. Asway's army had just returned to Igut when the Uruk Legion of the Kingdom of Babylon attacked, and this battle established the glory of the supreme general of the empire. As soon as this battle subsided, a war between Hittite and the Kingdom of Babylon broke out at the northern end of the Siyah Desert. Prince Ashur and Goliath were commanding the battle on the front lines, and just as they were about to achieve a complete victory, news suddenly came from the capital of Hittite, Hattusha. King Lucier had died, and Ashur's elder brother Anes had succeeded as the new king with the support of the remaining courtiers, and urgently summoned Prince Ashur to return to the capital to attend Lucier's funeral. Lucier's intention for Prince Ashur to command the army and for Goliath to assist him was obvious. He wanted to pass the throne to Ashur so that he could build up his reputation before he succeeded the throne. Lucier's death was very sudden, and everyone suspected that it was related to the struggle for the throne. If Prince Ashur really relinquished his military power and returned to the capital, it would be like sending a sheep into a tiger's den. With the consent of Goliath and the support of the frontline generals, Prince Ashur quickly negotiated an end to the war with the Kingdom of Babylon, and led the elites of the army and the generals back to the capital in the name of participating in the national mourning. The new king, Anes, had a guilty conscience to begin with. He knew best whether there was any inside story behind Lucier's death, and he did not expect Prince Ashur to return with an army. Anes succeeded the throne with the support of Chancellor Juguli, and in a panic, he listened to the Chancellor's advice and activated the magic formation protecting the capital, keeping everyone outside the city, so that Prince Ashur could enter the city alone to face his crimes against the kingdom. Ashur had not fully obeyed the king's orders, but he was not guilty. Anes did not expect the war to end so quickly. His original order was for Ashur to hand over the position of commander-in-chief to Goliath and return to attend the funeral. In the end, the war was over, the Kingdom of Babylon retreated, and Goliath and the other generals accompanied Ashur back. Ashur did not appear to be at fault, but had instead made a great contribution to the kingdom. The generals were not going to let it go. They spread the news that Prince Anes had killed his father to usurp the throne, and now he was going to kill his meritorious subjects. They planned to launch a mutiny and attack the capital. It looked like a civil war was about to break out. The city of Hattusha was sturdy and protected by a divine spell formation, making it very difficult to attack. No matter who won, the final outcome would be a lose-lose situation. At this critical juncture, Goliath called the Grand Elder of the Hittite Academy and entered the capital alone. He was the honorary chief elder of the Hittite Academy and had great prestige in the kingdom, so no one stopped him. Goliath went to the palace to see the new king and reported on the front lines. He asked, "Your Majesty, you should know the outcome. If Prince Ashur decides to launch a mutiny and the capital cannot be defended, what will happen to you? And what will happen to the Hittite kingdom? Do you want to hurt the whole kingdom in a civil war and end up dead? Or do you want a dignified solution?" Anes did not want to hear this, so he detained Goliath in the palace in the name of discussing state affairs. But this caused the various factions in the capital to split, and the people to be dissatisfied. The Hittite Academy was the first to object to the king's decision to detain Goliath, and even said that if the chief elder was not released, they would stop operating the magic formation protecting the capital. Even if Goliath did not resist, Anes would not dare to kill him. If the new king did not kill Goliath, they could still negotiate, but if he killed Goliath, it would definitely lead to a mutiny. King Ashur sent Prime Minister Juguli to persuade Goliath to support him. Juguli's nephew was Goliath's favorite student, Raphael, and he thought that Goliath and he were on the same side. However, Goliath asked the Prime Minister, "I won't ask how King Lucier died, but do you know what will happen to you? Do you want to bury yourself when the capital is breached and the kingdom suffers great damage? Or do you want to end this palace coup with dignity and not let the innocent soldiers and people die with you?" I can guarantee the safety of your family, as long as you do as I say and persuade Aeneas. Now he is very afraid, but he refuses to listen to me." In the end, Goliath was released from the palace, and the new king ordered him to live in the Hittite Academy of Magic, which was equivalent to a disguised house arrest. At this time, outside the capital, Ashur had led his army to surround all the cities in the capital, and there was a lot of news being passed around the city. The final resolution of the incident was unknown to outsiders, but there was no coup or mutiny in the Hittite kingdom. The mages of the capital stopped the magic formation protecting the city, and Prince Ashur and the generals led hundreds of personal guards into the city and stayed in their mansions. The Hittite Academy and the Hittite main shrine each sent people to protect the palace and Prince Ashur's mansion. That night, the new king Aeneas, who had just succeeded the throne for a month, announced his abdication and passed the throne to Ashur. Ashur had reclaimed the throne, and he might have achieved his goal if he had launched a mutiny, but the meaning was completely different now. Aeneas had abdicated the throne of his own accord, and the new king who had just succeeded the throne issued an edict, claiming that due to the sudden death of his father, the kingdom could not be without a monarch for even a day, so he had temporarily taken over the throne to stabilize the situation. Now that the wise and mighty Prince Ashur had returned, and his father had already ordered Ashur to be the new king, Aeneas' mission was finally completed, and the throne was officially passed to Ashur. This was the best ending for Aeneas. He was still the official monarch of the Hittite kingdom, not a usurper, but a king who had abdicated the throne of his own accord. His short one-month reign as king could be considered a meritorious deed for the kingdom. This was also the result of a compromise between the various factions, and Goliath made Ashur promise not to hold anyone involved in the coup accountable. Given the circumstances, even if Aeneas did not want to agree, someone else would make him agree. Prince Ashur succeeded the throne smoothly, avoiding the civil war that would have divided the kingdom. Prime Minister Juguli resigned due to illness, but he still enjoyed the glorious title of nobility, and his family was saved. Although Ashur promised not to hold the ministers accountable, changes in power and purges were inevitable, and the resignation of the prime minister was one such example. Goliath stayed in the capital until the situation stabilized before leaving. His contributions were so great that King Ashur did not know how to reward him. Instead, he granted Goliath the honor of not having to bow in front of the king, and gave him a special seat in the palace. He even asked Goliath in person, "Lord Goliath, you are like a father to me. How can I thank you?" Goliath smiled. "Everything I have done is for the people of Hittite. If your majesty wishes to thank me, please treat the kingdom well. Let me live the life I want, and I will thank your majesty for that." Doing what one loved was the greatest reward, and almost no one could obtain it, but Goliath did. Goliath did not want to stay in the capital to be a powerful minister, and Ashur could not force him. He returned to Saya and promoted Walter to be the chief priest of the city, while he continued to hold the glory of being the chief elder of the Hittite Academy of Magic. Ashur had wanted to appoint Raphael as the minister of the interior of the kingdom, which was to win over the forces that had originally supported Aeneas' faction, and also to give face to Goliath. But Raphael had other ambitions, and remained in Saya as the high priest. The court supreme mage Celia had also experienced this series of events, and naturally had no time to duel with Ao. During this period of time, she was also on the verge of breaking through to the 8th level, and needed to concentrate on her training. By the time she officially achieved the 8th level, peace had returned to the Hittite kingdom, and a messenger could be sent to Ao to determine the time and place for the duel. Before Celia's messenger could set off, Ao's messenger arrived first, and that was John. John left Igut with his 36 personal guards, and at the same time he had another mission, which was to find Celia to determine the time and place for the duel. John carried a letter written by Ao, on which was written, "You choose the place in Hittite, I set the time when I arrive." John grasped the timing and wanted to find Celia when Moses and the others were about to leave Igut. Celia's reply was quick, and she immediately sent a messenger to Igut and set the place for the duel, which was the camp where Ao had captured the king of Hittite. As for the time, of course, it was decided by the Supreme General himself after Ao arrived. Celia was ready at any time. When Celia's messenger arrived, Ao, who had refused to meet any guests, naturally had to personally receive him. He held a banquet to express his gratitude for the messenger's hard work. When the messenger saw Ao, the legendary supreme general of the Empire of Igut, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. Ao looked too young, just like a teenager, but he gave off such a profound feeling, like an unfathomable god. At the age of 16, Ao was already very strong, and his physique was no different from an adult. In an environment like Duk, the son of an old drunkard shouldered the burden of life at an early age. Opportunities also forced him to mature early. Later on, he was worshipped as a god by the barbarians, and his words and actions naturally carried a certain temperament. But these were not the main reasons. Ao had just experienced hundreds of years of time in Schrödinger's soul imprint. It was as if he was really there hundreds of years ago. The impression he gave off was that of a mature youth, more stable and tenacious than his peers. At this moment, Ao really gave off an unfathomable feeling. But his appearance hadn't changed much since he broke through the 7th level of the power of two sides at the age of 17. His face was still very handsome, with slightly curly short hair. Sometimes when he smiled, he looked like a child. The messenger originally had full confidence in his master, Celia. But after seeing Ao with his own eyes, his confidence was shaken. He wanted to hurry back and tell Celia about this feeling. The messenger was a young man in his 20s, with a round head and round eyes. His appearance was somewhat cute, but also delicate. His name was Rulio, and in front of Ao, he humbly called himself Ilu. He was a servant of Celia. Ao told Rulio that he would soon leave for the designated place on the southwest shore of the inland lake, and that he would inform Celia immediately when he arrived. Rulio smiled and said, "Supreme General does not need to inform Master Celia. I will wait for you there. As soon as you arrive, Master Celia will receive the news." Rulio said goodbye and left. Before leaving, he pointed to Schrödinger, who had been staying beside Ao, and said, "Is this cat the pet that the Supreme General brought to the battlefield? It really is extraordinary." Schrödinger sneezed and turned his neck to ignore Rulio. After he left, Schrödinger said to Ao, "This messenger is not human, have you noticed?" Ao was slightly startled. "I think this person is not simple, but I can't see that he is not human." "What do you mean?" "Schrödinger, you have all my knowledge, but after all, you have not reached my achievements in the past. You can see that this person is not ordinary, but you can't sense his innate breath. He should be similar to me in the past, both beasts who have opened their spiritual wisdom and have succeeded in their training. They can take human form, not the illusion of transformation magic or message magic, so you can't see it. Do you remember what Celia said when she challenged you to a duel?" Ao thought for a moment and replied, "She said to me at the time, 'When this war is over, I will bring my summoned beast, and you will bring this cat, and we will have a real duel.'" Schrödinger nodded and said, "Since she proposed to bring her summoned beast to a duel, that Celia must be a summoning magic master, and the summoned beast she mentioned is likely to be this Rulio. Now I have come to see my opponent in advance. You must be careful in this duel, and what you should really be wary of is the summoned beast." Ao had not practiced summoning magic, but he understood it. Mages raised some mutant beasts who had opened their spiritual wisdom, taught them all kinds of magical powers, and used magic to establish a soul contract, so that they would accept the summoning of the mage to help them in battle. In a broad sense, in fact, Batet was also a summoned beast of Osiris. From a broader point of view, necromancy magic was also a kind of summoning magic, able to gather the power of living souls for one's own use. But the highest level of summoning magic in the world usually referred to a situation where a supreme mage made a soul contract with a powerful mutant beast, teaching them many of the secrets of human training, and providing them with all kinds of help. In exchange, the summoned beast would appear in battle and help the supreme mage fight against powerful enemies. Sometimes the summoned beast was even more powerful than the master who summoned it, and the soul contract needed to be made voluntarily. After all, it was extremely difficult for beasts in the wild to train alone, and they might even be hunted down as demons. But with the protection and help of a supreme mage, There would be all kinds of unimaginable benefits and convenience. Ao nodded and said, I have seen Celia in action, and for a 7th level Supreme Mage, she is already very powerful. I haven't seen her for so long, maybe she has also broken through to the 8th level, but I am still confident that I will not lose to her. As for that Lilo, he has restrained his breath, and I can't see how powerful he is, but at least in terms of realm, he should not be inferior to me, and should be stronger than Celia. Schrödinger said worriedly, he has at least reached the 8th level, and the summoned beast is different from a human. You have met Elmar, right? She has the innate magic foundation, which does not change because of the power of awakening. Many mutant beasts do not need the power of the second awakening at all once they reach a higher level. Celia asked you to fight her and her summoned beast together with me, but unfortunately I do not have the power to help you fight now. Can you fight both of them alone? Ao looked at Schrödinger and smiled softly. Are you willing to be my summoned beast? Schrödinger's tone was indistinguishable from grievance or coquettishness. If you must let me be your summoned beast, of course, I will not refuse, but I can only do it for show. Ao laughed and said, why do you make it sound so pitiful? I am not Osiris, and you are not Batet. I have never regarded you as a pet or a summoned beast, and I will not let you do such a thing. As for the duel with Celia, I have already thought of a helper, and it can be regarded as his experience. Schrödinger suddenly reacted and said, you mean Elmar? I don't know how strong Elmar is now, but he should not be a match for that Lilo. Ao shook his head and said, I do not intend to let Elmar deal with Lilo. He only needs to hold back Celia, and I will deal with this powerful summoned beast myself. This duel will be very interesting. Let's not talk about this. This duel is just an excuse for me to follow Moses and leave Igut. What I care about most now is you. Schrödinger said, me? That's easy. Just like before, you put me in your bag and carry me on your back, and we will leave Igut together. As for unlocking the soul seal, you have done your best. There is no need to rush. Take your time. Do your own things first. Don't delay it because of me. Ao looked up at the sky and let out a long sigh, as if he felt a deep sense of regret. Schrödinger asked curiously, what's wrong with you? I rarely hear you sigh like this. It seems like you have found something, but also like you have lost something. Ao smiled and said, before the messenger arrived, I had already found out what the seal that imprisoned your soul is. As long as you are willing, you can unlock it at any time. But if you can't unlock it yourself, you will never be able to unlock it. Schrödinger was surprised and happy. Have you found a way to unlock the seal? Why wouldn't I be willing? Tell me quickly. I have waited for 100 years, and I have finally waited for this day. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.